The story begins with the confusion of people holding a sword in their hands. They are at a loss to ask if this is exactly the B rank. One blue-eyed guy with dark hair and a kind of collar around his neck draws people's attention and shouts that it's a wyvern. A huge dragon appears in front of these guys, who bowed his head close to them. His tongue is sticking out of his mouth, and a light smoke is coming from there. Dragon eyes of fiery and golden colors. A girl with blonde hair steadfastly holds a sword and shouts to a blue-haired guy, whose name is Shu, to hide behind her. The guy, in turn, is scared and surprised. The girl shouts in a confident voice that she will protect him, but her hands, in which she holds a sword, tremble without ceasing. Shu sees this, then gathers his courage, steps forward, blocking the girl with his hand. The man calls him a squire and shouts at him not to get into trouble. This Shu tells everyone that the wyvern has two skills, a fireball and a flap of wings. Everyone listens to him with surprise, and he continues to tell her that when using a fireball, she is able to fire up to 5 shells in a row. This is Amasora Shu. He is 20 years old. The blonde freezes listening to his speech. Then abruptly Shu shouts to everyone to take care and dodge, because the same fireball is formed and flies towards them. A few days before that, Shu calmly walks down the street and turns around and has a conversation where he sounded surprised about a whole million. He sees 2 men talking to each other. One confirms the other's surprise and says that a very valuable reward fell out of the monster he killed. The second man tells him that the first was lucky with the class. Shu is looking for something in his breast pocket because he hears something. He takes out his phone and sees how he was debited 4 times different amounts of money. 12-0, 6380, 35-0, 56-0. And as a result, 12,035 yen remained on the balance. Next comes the story that it happened about 50 years ago in Tokyo. The residents of the capital enjoyed a peaceful life until one day the dungeons appeared. Since that day, everything has been turned upside down. Each person has received his own class. One of the artifacts obtained in the dungeons were class books. Touching this book, people of a certain class could awaken a new power in themselves. Of course, all classes had different powers. With the help of this superhuman power, they were able to curb the dungeons, and he, Amasora Shu, has a slightly unusual power. Suddenly the wall cracks, some hard roots come out from under the tiles. A huge monster with one red eye is formed, and its body consists entirely of trees. Shu stands holding the sword tightly. He opens his eyes wide and tells the monster over and over again to look at him again. His bright blue eyes make an assessment while looking at the monster. He sees that this monster is called a wooden golem. The creature consists of wood, its strength is equal to level D, and the weak points are the head. It is also vulnerable to fire magic attacks. Among his skills, one can distinguish a lunge, which consists in the fact that he strikes the ground with one of his limbs. Shu analyzes in his head and comes to the conclusion that he is slow, very strong, but has only one skill in stock. The monster hits the ground with its huge fist. Shu jumps back, dodging the blow. He is preparing to grab a sword. He thinks that since the monster is made of wood, he can easily cut it with a sword. He pulls out his sword, swings, and cuts the monster's legs. The wooden goalie falls, having no support under it. Shu immediately reflects and remembers that his weak point is his head. He jumps up, approaches the monster while it is immobilized, and pierces its single red eye with his sword. The system notifies him that 30 experience points have been received and that he has increased his level. He hardly says out loud that he has won. He lets go of the sword and falls back, exhaling heavily. He takes out his phone with the words that he needs to stop recording, otherwise his charging will quickly run out. He stops recording, pointing the camera at the monster, and rejoices that he captured everything. He thinks he's lucky that the phone didn't crash. He wouldn't want to spend money because of such stupidity. Then he remembers that he was given a level there, so he calls himself a window of characteristics. According to the system, he is at level 2, his mana reserve is 110. His physical strength is also, and his assessment skill itself is still at level 1. His skill has a low attacking potential. He would even say that the skill is useless in places, but at the same time unique. Using this skill on people, you can see their characteristics, but, in his opinion, peeping through the window of characteristics without a person's permission is a bit contrary to moral norms. Suddenly he hears some sounds, turns around and sees that the monster is leaving some kind of reward. His body evaporates, leaving only a small part of his body, that is, a sliver of a wooden golem. In short, with the help of this skill, you can find out information about people or monsters. However, it is not uncommon to find a score sheet in dungeons that also reveals information about monsters. One such sheet can be bought for 1,000 yen. In other words, its services cost no more than 1,000. With these thoughts, he puts this sliver of a wooden golem in his backpack. He continues to reflect, because people often do not want anyone to look at their loot or found magical artifacts, so they prefer to take evaluation sheets. He has dreamed of becoming a seeker since childhood, but with such a useless skill, in his opinion, it will be difficult for him to even just survive. In the Capital Guild of Seekers, Shu comes about the evaluation. He holds green crystals in his hands. People turn to him and do not understand if he is also a seeker. The second one tells him not to pay attention, because he is just moonlighting for them. Then they discuss him. One heard that his class is an appraiser, which, they say, can evaluate objects or creatures without using evaluation sheets. The second one is indignant, saying that he is of zero use. The second one tells him to be quiet, because Shu can hear it. Shu really still hears their conversation. He says to himself that they will see that he will definitely become a first-class seeker, but for now he is sitting here in the guild and is engaged in evaluating items. This crystal he was holding in his hand is a mithril ore. Guilds often have to investigate items that fall from monsters. That's where his power becomes at least a little useful. He charges 700 yen for one item, which is 300 yen cheaper than the evaluation sheet. The woman hands him an envelope and says that this is his money for today. He thanks her. A month has passed since he became a seeker. His main income comes from part-time work in the guild. When he has extra mana, he often helps employees at the reception. They say goodbye to him in the guild and tell him not to go into the dungeons. They still don't need him to get hurt. Shu sighs heavily. Looking at the envelope, he realizes that he earned 77 yen in 1 hour, given that it takes about 10 hours to restore mana. In fact, 77 yen comes out in 11 hours. It's not good for him, but he has no other choice. He walks down the street with the idea that he needs to get home as soon as possible. When he gets home, he is actively typing something. Later, he says out loud that he has something ready. He looks at his phone, wondering what about the video, then selects one video and decides to upload it. He thinks it's a little blurry, but in general it will do for him. He is actively typing again and decides to start with a description. He writes, starting with the title, I check the characteristics of my slime and kill it. To tell the truth, he doesn't think that appraisers can become full-fledged seekers, so he wants to prepare a safety cushion in the form of a YouTube channel. He says that on the internet, of course, you can find information about slimes, but has anyone recorded a video with an optimal strategy for killing slimes? He clicks on the computer again and clicks on the download button. After he uploaded the video with slime, he was glad that now he could sleep. He turned off the light and lay down on the bed. He's waiting for people's reactions. After all, this is his first video. An hour later, he sees that the video has gained 5 views. He reflects that this should have been expected, because he just created the channel. He hopes to have more views tomorrow. His eyes slowly close, and he falls asleep. The system notifies again and again that 1 experience point has been received. The video has gained 9 views, and there are still no subscribers. He gets another experience point, after which the system notifies that he has increased his level. Shu abruptly opens his eyes after a deep sleep, drooling from his mouth, and he does not understand what the sounds were that night. He doesn't understand if it was a notification about a level increase just now. He thinks he dreamed it. He gets out of bed and decides to check anyway, just in case. A window opens in front of him. His eyes open wide. The system shows that he is now at level 3. He understands that the indicator has really increased. His mana reserve is 110 units. His physical strength is also 110 units. And among the skills, the score is still at level 1. After checking again, he opens his eyes even wider. In the characteristics window, mana is already 120 units, which is more than last time. He wonders how to understand this, because he raised the 3rd level without killing a single monster. He thinks that this may be a mistake. He decides to sit down at the computer and search for something about it on the internet. He drives in different queries. According to the type, the level has increased by itself, or an error with an increase in the level, or experience points are awarded automatically. He doesn't find any information about it at all. He thinks, is he really the first one who stumbled upon this mistake? Then he abruptly remembers about the video and is interested in what's going on with his video. What progress? He decides to see what's wrong with him. He is surprised and happy that he has scored more than 30 views in 1 evening. He shouts these words with shock and delight. He leans back in his chair and says that it's not bad for the first video. Then he decides that he will upload 6 more videos that day. His face turns red and his lips break into a smile. The next day he sits, nervous and not understanding anything. He sees that the system shows the 5th level. He is shocked to wonder what is going on here at all. He's already at the 5th level. He doesn't understand why it happened, because he didn't do anything. A notification arrives abruptly. He opens his phone and sees that a comment has been left under his video. He immediately starts watching his first comment, which he is very happy about. There, a certain lion, on whose avatar sweets are placed, wrote that, thanks to him, he was able to defeat his first monster, after which he thanks the author of the video. Shu is very worried and happy. He is already trembling and writes a reply comment to this one lion with gratitude. He is glad that someone has used his assessment skill. In total, he uploaded 7 videos to the network, with a bat, which scored 18 views, a wooden golem, which scored 314 views, a mushroom monster, which scored 132 views. In total, he has more than 1,000 views. He thinks that this is a great start for a beginner. He hopes that there will be people like this lion who will be helped by his videos. At some point, awareness comes to him and freezes, stops turning the mouse and typing. He wonders if he really gets experience points for every person who defeated the monster after watching his video. For example, a healer. They gain experience for healing the wounds of a comrade who killed a monster. The system takes into account that the monster was killed with the help of this person, so it divides the points between 2 people. In other words, users watch his videos and kill monsters, and then the system gives him points for a dead person. He wonders again if it's real at all, stroking his chin with his index finger, because nothing else comes to his mind. He takes a backpack and decides that he needs to conduct an experiment. He leaves his house, walks through the city and comes to the dungeon. The sign says that entry is allowed only for seekers. There are a huge bunch of dungeons in the world. He decided to go to a bottomless dungeon near his house. Among all the videos, the one where he killed slime has the largest number of views. Of course, there are many sites that display information about monsters, but often they post characteristics of only medium-sized monsters. Beginners also want to learn more about weak monsters, in other words. He raises his sword in front of him, preparing for battle, beads of sweat streaming from his face. Skeletons, zombies, and other monsters are standing in front of him, lifelessly walking towards him. If he posts videos with monsters about which there is no information on the internet, he will be able to earn a lot of views. He says the skeletons don't have weapons, but their fingers are sharp enough to disembowel a person, so he asks people to be careful. In the video where the skeleton attacks him, he breathes a sigh of relief because he almost hit him. He says out loud the information that zombies strike hard, but they swing for a long time. In addition, their thinking is primitive, and therefore it is quite easy to dodge the attack. About ghosts, he says that they are susceptible only to magic, so if people don't know how to cast, he advises it's better to run away from him. Then he adds that, fortunately, they are quite slow, so you don't have to worry. He prints it all very quickly and says that it's finally ready, the analysis of the undead is finished. And now he just has to wait for the results. After the video is published, an infinite number of notifications come to him overnight, which was received by 1 experience point. As a result, in the morning he sees that he is now at level 10, the mana reserve is 190, physical strength 2, his assessment skill is at level 3, and the inventory skill is also adapted at the first level. He raises his hands up and joyfully shouts that his theory has been confirmed, and that he has raised the 10th level. He shouts this in front of the window of his work, where he was engaged in a part-time job as an appraiser of all sorts of objects. Other people turn to him in disbelief. The woman menacingly tells Shu not to shout in the guild. He awkwardly rubs the back of his head and asks for forgiveness. He takes out his phone and sees how his video about slime has gained 314 views. He turns to his bag and says that in the comments they write that thanks to his new camera, the picture has become much more pleasant to the eye. He clenches his fist and says that he is very glad that his 30,000 was not wasted. He looks around at other people, and then calls up the characteristics window in a whisper. He notices that he has added 1 skill inventory. It allows you to put things in a special subspace. The volume of the subspace is a large cardboard box. He thinks it's not that cool, but then he says with a nervous laugh that it will do for him for the first time. He is offended, of course, that his characteristics are growing very slowly. At such a pace he will have to raise a lot of levels to become a worthy seeker. He sees comments where his subscribers ask him different questions. One wrote if he could add text to the video, the second says it's hard to watch, and the third asks if he plans to improve the quality of editing. Shu thinks about it and says that, of course, he can download free video editors, but this still needs to be learned. He says that he doesn't know any editors, and he can't afford to do for money yet. There are too few subscribers on his channel to get monetization. If he gets stronger, he will be able to go to a decent part-time job. Suddenly, he sees an ad for a part-time job in a dungeon with a high salary. He stops, presses it and says with a smile that it suits him. Amazora Shu finds herself in front of the building of the Guild Lords of the Orphs. He looks at the skyscraper and is surprised at such a scale. The building is completely covered with glass, and in front of it there is a statue of 2 lions with 1 torso. One calm, the other growls while they are enveloped by a snake. A week later, he received a notice of employment. The message thanks him for responding to their ad, and they are also happy to announce that they are ready to hire him as a temporary employee. He enters the building and first asks for forgiveness from the employee, and says that he came about a side job. She smiles, asks if he really is Amazora Shu. She asks him to follow her, he thanks her. They pass through the corridors of this huge building. Inside, too, the walls between the offices are furnished with glass, where you can see how a man, showing a woman on the screen, teaches her something very interesting. Going to the office, he reflects and comes to the conclusion that it looks like the guild is going to conduct a large-scale sortie, given that they have hired a level 10 seeker. They enter the number 1 meeting room, which has a creepy atmosphere. Several serious-looking men immediately pay attention to him. There are a lot of scary and gloomy people sitting inside, with scars, bandages, masks, piercings. They all look at Shu without any mood, as if his appearance does not change their course of life in any way. Shu immediately gets scared and twitches, seeing such people. He thinks that the most terrible people have gathered here, and that it is necessary to say hello as soon as possible so that he will not be considered rude. He bows abruptly with his eyes closed and quickly introduces himself as Amasaurus Shu, informs them that he will be their porter for today, so he asks them to love and favor him. There is silence. Everyone turns to look at him and continues to stare in silence. After a moment, everyone returns to their topics and discusses their affairs, as if Shu had just said nothing. Shu stays on the sidelines and wonders what he only expected. Who would care about some porter there? Suddenly someone greets him and thanks him for coming to them. This blonde guy represents the head of the Guild of the Orph Lords. His name is Kaizuma Shogo. He holds out his hand to him and says that he is counting on him. He's all in a blue work uniform and brown gloves. Shu holds out his hand in return, shakes it and thanks them for hiring him. Shogo leaves, but turns to him and informs him that the meeting will start soon, so he advises him to take his seat. Everyone sits down at a large table. Shu wonders if this room is designed for 30 people. He decides that it is better to sit somewhere in a corner. He accidentally touches and pushes another girl, after which she falls to the floor screaming. Shu hurriedly holds out his hand to her, apologizes and says that he did not look where he was going. He asks if she's hurt anywhere. The girl blushes, takes his hand and answers with a smile that everything is fine and asks him to forgive her too. Shu says to herself that she is a foreigner, which means that now high school students can also become seekers. They sit down next to the chair. The girl asks him to love and favor, because she was also hired as a squire. She says that if she is not mistaken, he is Amasaurus Shu. Then she introduces herself and says that her name is Evil Lion. Shu says he remembered her name. In turn, he asks her to love and favor. Then he abruptly remembers something. If he is not mistaken, then he received his first comment from a man named Lion. Then he changes his mind and says it's just a coincidence who in their right mind will use their real name as a nickname in the comments. He asks Lion if she is a local. She replies that she is not a local, and that her parents are from Russia and America, but she was born in Japan and raised here. She looks at him and asks in perplexity if he didn't take his backpack with him. Then Shu uses her inventory and tells her to look. As a result, a bottle of water comes out of the magic ball. Lion is seriously surprised. He says that this is his skill. He can hide things in a special space and take them out at any time. Before that, he was happy with the fact that thanks to the views, he raised the level and raised the inventory to the 3rd level. Now you can store a whole mountain of things here. Lion is sad and says how she envies them, because she has all the fighting skills. Shu barely smiles and thinks that it's more likely that he should be jealous. Then he says out loud that he doesn't really have any attacking skills, and that it might not sound like a man. Could she protect him in case of something? She smiles very brightly and says that everyone should do what they can, so they can count on her. Shu privately calls her cute. Suddenly the light turns off. They look around, because it suddenly became dark in the room. The chief announces to everyone that they are starting a meeting, so he asks everyone to keep quiet. Shogo steps forward, turns on the screen and begins to tell that 3 guilds will take part in this expedition. Other people in another room appear on the screen. Shogo says that they are on a video call, and that he will turn on the microphone now, so they should refrain from inappropriate conversations. Suddenly, Shu sees a certain girl with red eyes on the screen and recognizes her. This is the head of the Guild of Bloody Idols, and part-time seeker of rank of Bloody Kuramine. Seekers are divided into several ranks. The head of the Orphan Guild, Kaizuma, has a rank of B. There is another person of rank B on the screen. But as for rank A, there are not even 10 people in Japan. Unexpectedly, Lion asks out loud whether this means that they will go to the dungeon with them. Shu confirms this. Seekers of low ranks are usually used as porters. They pay quite a lot for such sorties, and, apparently, they will not face serious dangers. Shogo tells everyone that newcomers have joined them today, so he will tell them about their plan. He says that this expedition will take place in the newly appeared Heavenly Palace, a Ranka dungeon. Here Shu freezes in shock, not believing that they will go to a Ranka dungeon. This is a dungeon that rather hovers above the ground in the sky. Both Lion and Shu freeze in shock. Shogo goes on to say that they have already given a name to the dungeon they will go to this time. It's the Heavenly Palace. This dungeon is broadcast on the screen. He adds that in another way it is also called the Heavenly Fortress. Shu can't believe they're joking. This fortress is right next to the gate. His level and physical strength index are too low to go to such dungeons. But Shono was encouraging everyone so confidently. He told Shu with a big smile that he was counting on him, so he couldn't leave like that. Be that as it may, this expedition is an exploration. There can be no question of a full passage. And the reason for this is the lack of competent seekers. No guild is capable of clearing an rank dungeon alone. Kiramine, the head of the guild, says that before entering the dungeon, she would like to go through the plan again. One of their goals is to create a transshipment point inside the dungeon. She goes on to say that if this is not possible, then at least get the maximum amount of information about monsters. But, of course, the main task is to complete the dungeon, so she wants to ask them to join forces and act as a well-coordinated team. Shu and Lion listen with open mouths to the speech of the head of the Guild of Bloody Idols, Kiramine Shizuka. The expedition has about 80 participants, most of whom are members of its guild. Judging by their equipment, the idols are quite experienced seekers. With the help of these gates, you can move between Earth and another world. Apparently, only Kiramine's squad will go to the dungeon, while the rest of the guilds will supply supplies and send reinforcements. Lion says he can't believe he's going to take part in something so grand. She says this in the context of a dungeon in Blood Idols. Shu agrees with her and says he feels the same way. Kiramine Shizuka says to let the names of those people who entered the first squad be announced. She adds that the group will also include seekers from other guilds. Shu thinks to himself that at first he was almost scared at the announcement. But if you think carefully, then low-level porters like him and Lion will never be taken into the vanguard. After these words, Shizuka pronounces the names Evil Lion and Amasora Shu. Everyone freezes in silence. These two, with pale faces and eyes full of panic, cannot believe that they were the ones who were summoned. They ask again if they were wrong. Shizuka says that by no means, she made this decision after carefully studying the data of each of those present. Then she adds that, of course, she will pay them properly for their work. Shu, in a panic, stammers that it's not that at all. He doesn't understand why they are. They've seen their level, they're still quite green. Everyone hides their eyes, looking around. Shizuka says that it doesn't matter, because in such dungeons, all seekers below C rank are equal among themselves. Shu looks around at the others and is surprised that no one objects. Then he realizes that this is of course true, because they also do not want to risk their lives in a dungeon. Shizuka says that, of course, they have the right to refuse. She will understand everything. Shu's eyes widen. He has dreamed of becoming a seeker since childhood. Perhaps this is his only chance to fight shoulder to shoulder with the strongest seeker in Japan. He clenches his fist. He decides that's why he has to make this decision. He announces to everyone that he agrees. Here Lion is surprised by his decision. She shouts his name loudly. Shu calmly tells her that Lion doesn't have to go inside. She, still with frightened eyes, looks at him. He says that he is just stupid, who risks his life for nothing. Lion bows his head, hesitantly begins to speak, and then finally, following Shu, says that she will also go with them. Shizuka says it means they agree, which is nice. If you leave the dungeon unattended, monsters will start to get out, which puts civilians at risk. Over the past 50 years, many people have lost their lives as a result of such incidents. The monsters living in the A-rank dungeons are very strong. However, when the Bloody Idols took over, the monsters had no chance of survival. Lion and Shu are watching the battles. He is surprised, enthusiastically watching them, says that it is not for nothing that they are considered the strongest guild in Japan. Lion tells Shu that he is unusually calm, calling him Amasora. He says that Lion can just call him Shu. He says that at first he was also very worried, but it seems that he is moving forward without any problems. He wonders if it's already the 6th floor. The lower they go down into the dungeon, the stronger the enemies become. He thinks that maybe they will finish much earlier than they expected. While he was thinking it all over, a kind of slime appeared behind him, on which a huge eye hangs. This monster attacks Shu sharply. He immediately panics. But this monster is cut by Lion. She asks him if he's okay. The monster lies cut in half between them. A frightened Shu is sitting on the floor, stammering his thanks to her. She says it's a good thing he wasn't hurt. Shu notices and sees that Lion's legs are shaking. She sighs with relief. Shu thinks to himself that she was really scared. He doesn't understand why she decided to become a seeker. Suddenly someone shouts to them, calling for porters. They report that they have stumbled upon a nest of monsters. Before them appeared a huge collection of spiders with red eyes and fast paws. They shout that if they get to them, they should run without looking back. Lion and Shu start to panic beforehand. Shu shouts that it's so easy to say, and Lion with a pale face tells him that the monster is heading straight for them. She gets up with a sword and tells Shu to hide somewhere. She stabs the spider with her sword with her eyes closed. They stop for a second, and then Lion's sword flies away from her with a clang, and she falls back to the ground. Shu rushes to her aid. But then the spider lets out its web to Lion that her hand is now attached to the ground by a web. Spider approaches Lion with short laughs. Lion's eyes fill with tears. She freezes in horror and waiting for the end. Shu, meanwhile, is evaluating the monster. It is a large spider with an E-level strength, and that its weak point is its stomach, and it is also vulnerable to fire. His skill is a special ability, which consists in immobilizing his prey with sticky threads. He calls the inventory, puts his hand in there and diligently searches for something. He thinks he should have at least something useful. Suddenly, something comes into his hand, and he pulls out a can of lighter. This is a budget flamethrower for the extermination of insects. He approaches the monster, substitutes a lighter for him, and then with rage, so that the monster gets from him, lets out a gas canister. But then a failure overtakes him and no gas comes out of him. Lion and the monster turn to him, and Shu remembers that he poisoned cockroaches yesterday. The monster turns away from him and starts for Lion. Then Shu is thinking hard again. He got the weakest class of all possible. His abilities will not help in any way when cleaning the dungeon. But still, with such thoughts, he runs to Lion and covers her body with his body. Tears flow from Lion's eyes. She briefly pronounces his name. Suddenly, blood gushes from the monster. They turn around and see Shizuke firing his bloody bullets at him. These bullets hit the monster directly. He gets several bullets at the same time from different sides. The monster falls, and Shu and Lion look at it in shock. Shizuke leaves the place contentedly, while Shu and Lion remain in place. He helps the girl to get up. They only hear the drops that continuously fall down with a loud sound. They walk calmly down the corridor. Lion says Kuramine is incredible. Shu agrees and says that Ranka is not given to anyone. The girl speaks uncertainly, not knowing how to say it. She apologizes to Shu and says that she is sorry that he almost got hurt because of her. Here Shu says in a panic, but there was something to apologize for because Kuramine saved them, not him. She listlessly says that she promised that she would protect him. Then he declares more confidently, clenching his fists in front of him, that next time she will definitely cope. Shu thinks to himself how cute it is, even though it hurts his male pride. She asks him why he decided to become a seeker, because he has no attacking skills. He begins to answer uncertainly and at the same time recall the past. A picture of endlessly beeping sounds pops up in his head, letting people know about a person's heartbeat. He is interrupted from his thoughts by Lion, calling him by name. It turns on, but suddenly they hear the order to stand. Someone says that he knew that soon they would have to face Rank B. Shu's eyes open wide. A figure gradually peeks out of the dark corridor. Smoke is coming out of the darkness, like the breath of some creature. Someone shouts that it's a wyvern. A huge red dragon appears before them. Shu immediately has an assessment. This is a red wyvern, at the rank of level B. And magic of level C. Strength is also equal to level B. His weak point is his stomach. And among the skills he sees a fireball and a flap of wings. Shu is scared because she has a large mana reserve and huge physical strength, not to mention 2 skills. They, of course, assumed that a B rank monster would appear, but this wyvern is strong even for a B rank. This judgment is based on his assessment skill, but a monster of a certain rank requires at least 3 seekers of the same level. Among them there are 3 seekers of rank B, swordsman, healer and 1 support. But their skills, in his opinion, leave much to be desired. Fortunately, there is one a rank seeker among them. Shizuke tells everyone else to back off. Shu continues to think that if only one wyvern attacks them, then there should be no problems. But then his thoughts are interrupted by another sound coming from behind them. They turn around and see the second red dragon approaching them, only he is much scarier than that wyvern. Shu says that this can't be, that there are 2 wyverns with them now, and besides, he has them pinched on both sides. Someone from the crowd complains and says that no one informed them that high-ranking monsters would attack them at the same time. Another asks what she expected at all, because this isn't a rank dungeon. Shizuke abruptly runs in one direction, which he notices and does not understand Shu. She turns around and says she'll deal with him, and then asks Shu to buy her some time. Shu is left alone with this thought and does not understand why he is the one. Lion shouts to Shu then that the wyvern's tail is heading straight for them. They manage to get away from the tail and scatter in different directions. The dragon is preparing to attack again. A guy in a red suit and with a sword stands in front of Lion and Shu. He uses magic. His sword is enveloped in flames of fire. He jumps sharply at the dragon, shouting for the dragon to get away from him. Here Shu worriedly thinks that the fire magic will not work on her, because they will not be able to hold out until Kuramine returns. Suddenly a thought comes to his mind. There is one way they can defeat them, however. He is interrupted from his thoughts by Lion, who tells him to hide behind her. She stands in front of him in a panic, opening one hand as a sign that she will protect him. She, through tears and shudders from sobbing and panic, says haltingly that she will protect him. He sees it all, grits his teeth, gathers courage and gets up from the ground. He tells himself that now is not the time to hesitate. He shouts to everyone that the wyvern has 2 skills, a fireball and a flap of wings. He tells everyone that when using a fireball, she is able to release up to 5 shells in a row, and during the flapping of her wings, she makes a leap forward, strengthening her body with magic. Everyone turns to him and looks at him in surprise. He continues to shout that she is immune to magic and the element of fire, so you need to use physical attacks. This is a B rank monster. They have no way to use items, and almost no one knows the characteristics of a wyvern. But it is information that gives an advantage that can turn the tide of battle. The only problem is that, being on the verge of death, no one wants to trust the words of some porter there. Suddenly, one man tells him that he understood everything. Shu's face is both surprised and calmed down. The man says that this means that he will not be able to use fire spells, and that they must delay the wyvern with ice magic and physical attacks until the captain deals with the second monster. Someone in the crowd calls this man Takeyama and asks if he will really believe this brat. Takeyama says that, being unarmed, Shu tried to protect the girl from the spider, so such a stupid guy doesn't have enough brains to invent such characteristics. They agree with him and say that since the wyvern has resistance to magic, then spells are unlikely to cause much damage. They need to somehow lose it before the captain returns. Takeyama asks Shu if he has anything on the wyvern. He thinks about it and, seeing the ball in the dragon's mouth, comes to the idea that she collects mana in her mouth. He shouts to everyone that the wyvern will now breathe fire. Everyone reacts very quickly, so two of the crowd conjure an ice shield, which stops the wyvern's fireball. Having raised level 20, he gained the skill of observation. With its help, it is possible to predict the next movement of the enemy. His eyes light up with blue fire. He sees how the dragon's leg does not really begin to float in the air. He shouts to everyone that she is going to use the flapping of her wings, and that she is about to enchant her scales with magic and make a dash in their direction. That most likely she will break the magic shield. The dragon rises from the ground and flies straight towards them. The vanguards are ordered to raise their shields. Takeyama says they have to stop her. The dragon with its head and neck crashes into the shields that the fighters have raised. There were traces of blood on the sharp spikes of the shields. The dragon pulls away. Blood gushes from his neck. He breathes smoke. Shu sees it all and understands that they managed to do damage. He starts shouting that Kuramine can now. He does not finish, as she herself comes and says that this is exactly what will happen, and that she has just been released. She stands in front of Shu and looks at the dragon. People begin to rejoice when they see their captain. The wyvern breathes angrily in their direction. Shizuke raises his hands beautifully and uses blood absorption. The blood that came out of the dragon's neck begins to rapidly come out of his body and envelop him. Shu thinks that as soon as she uttered the name of the technique, all the blood left the monster's body and rushed to Kuramina. All the blood was sucked out of the dragon's body. He fell exhausted to the ground, shrinking several times in size. Unexpectedly, Shu receives an alert from the system that he killed a red wyvern, and that 120 experience points were obtained. Then 50, followed by 72 more experience points. Then 35, 64, and 52. Everyone looks at Shu with support. Takeyama puts his hand on his shoulder, and Lion happily squeezes Shu's jacket with tears in his eyes. He raised his level. Lion says enthusiastically that it was incredible. She tells Shu that as an ordinary porter, he made a huge contribution to the battle. He happily scratches the back of his head. Blushing, says that come on to her, because he just told the guys about the abilities of monsters. Lion tells him not to be modest, because he helped them all out so much. After killing the wyvern, he used his assessment skill on other floors as well, helping the group deal with monsters. He didn't fight in the front ranks, so he didn't get much experience, and yet he was able to raise his level a lot. He reflects that they have reached as far as the 15th floor. The bloody idols are really strong, in his opinion. But, having raised the level of his skills, he realized that there is no one stronger than. Before he has time to think, Shizuke tells him that she did the right thing by taking him with them. He looks up and turns to her. She tells him that his assessment skill was very useful to them. He says he thought she invited him because of the gathering skill. She says he's not bad either, not to mention his third skill. Shu shudders at these words. Shizuke expresses hope that he will meet her expectations. He wonders if she included him in the first squad because she knew about the potential benefits of his skills. Then he thinks that this means that Lion also has some kind of trump card up his sleeve. Is their whole squad just like that? The head of a wolf-like monster is cut off on the battlefield. At a distance, Shu receives an alert that he first received 160 experience points, then another 160, then 200, 230, and so on. He is given more and more experience. He wonders if this means that people find his information useful. Takeyama pats him on the head and tells him that he is not a blunder. The other asks if he will leave him his number. Shu smiles sweetly. He likes it all. Every 5 levels, the skill level increases, while for every 10 levels, he is given a new ability. As they walked back to the dungeon, Lion told him to hide behind her if anything happened. He was still in his thoughts. It would be nice for him if the 5 skill would help him fight monsters. Suddenly, Shu notices something is wrong. A monster with huge fangs appears behind Lion. He assumes it's an ogre and doesn't understand where it came from. The ogre swings a huge stone that was in his palm and throws it. Shu realizes that the stone is flying towards Lion and runs to help. He has time to think that this ogre spared no effort, and that his stamina is not enough to survive this throw. If he gets into it, then he can be put in a coffin. He flies right past Lion, who slowly looks at him. In this case, he decides to use his collecting skill. This stone is absorbed into the palm of Shu, but in the end, he still flies back, hitting his back against the post. Blood from Shu splashes on Lion's face. Takayama notices that something has happened to Shu and shouts his name. Suddenly, a crowd of ogres comes out of one side. Someone shouts that they have stumbled upon a crowd of ogres, so they need to regroup. Shu is sitting at the post with his hand bleeding. He even calms down from the fact that he somehow got through, and he is alive. He says out loud that he seems to have broken his arm. Then Lion flares up and shouts that she will not forgive this. Her sword is enveloped in golden energy. Shu notices and says to herself that her sword has been engulfed by yellow magic, and that this is a class skill of Lion. She swings this sword in front of the ogre, after which the body of this monster is simply divided in half. Shizuke turns to her and looks at her contentedly. Shu analyzes it. Evil Lion, age 17, level 16, and her class is a divine summoner. A divine beast had taken over her body, or rather, her weapon. He vaguely sees that the mana reserve is 1550 units, and the physical strength is 620. Among her skills, she has the summoning of a divine beast at level 4, and the summoning of a spirit only at the second. Based on what he saw with the help of assessment and observation, she still has poor control over her skill, which means she hid her skill because she was afraid to harm others. Lion's call pulls him out of his thoughts. He raises his head and begins to hear questions about what is wrong with his hand, and that he needs first aid. He says Lion will calm down. Suddenly, a cone with a red potion flies to him. He catches it with his free hand and does not understand what it is. Shizuke tells him to drink the potion and that it should cure him completely. Shu asks if she is sure of this, because it is a very expensive item. She bends down and tells him to drink, because if he dies, they will lose all the things that were hidden by his skill. He opens the cone with his teeth and is disappointed that she is worried about loot. Lion sees that he finds it difficult to open it. She wanted to help, but then Shizuke's hand reaches out. She leans close to him, says that she also needs his strength, takes the cone and opens it. He drinks the potion with the feeling that he has been divorced like a child. Lion is sitting next to him, red-faced but unhappy. Shizuke says that, by the way, she apologizes for being so sudden, but it looks like their assignment will drag on for another day. Takayama asks if they really want to set up camp here, while simultaneously asking Shu how he is there. Shizuke says that to tell the truth, she didn't think they would go this far. Then she tells Shu that it's entirely his doing. He is surprised and says that the bloody idols could have coped without him. Shizuke cuts off sharply that no, they couldn't. She says that everyone present has already been to the Heavenly Fortress, then their guild suffered huge losses and they had to retreat. She adds that they have done nothing to become stronger. In other words, their victory is entirely his merit. Shu freezes on the spot from such words. Shizuke holds out her hand to him and says she wants him to join their guild and asks him to think about her offer. Lion rejoices the most and shouts to Shu that he was invited to the Bloody Idols. Shu reflects to himself that he is terribly weak. His characteristics and skills are simply terrible, and yet he was recognized by one of the strongest seekers in Japan. He was very happy and even managed to forget that it is at such moments that tragedy happens. After that, they continued to explore the dungeon. When they reached the 25th floor, they came across. Shu's eyes widen in surprise and expectation. Everyone freezes in front of the barrier. Takayama declares that they have come here. They find themselves in front of the gates of the hall where the dungeon boss is located. This is a huge door decorated with golden curls. The man in armor is surprised and says, "So this is how the dungeons of rank." Takayama looks tired and at the same time relieved that it was not easy. Lion and Shu stand silently in front of these doors. Every seeker knows what is behind these gates. The strongest monster of the dungeon is waiting for its hour behind them. If you kill the boss, then there will be nothing left until the dungeon is completely completed. The only thing that will need to be done is to activate the self-destruct mechanism hidden in the boss room. A certain cube that is hidden inside the room, after activation, this cube itself splits into parts, like soil. However, it also happens that the dungeons remain in their original places even after self-destruction. Shu is still not sure if they are really going to go there. In such dungeons, you can find the skeletons of past seekers who have been rotting here for many years. You can also notice that in some area there was a battle from the presence of arrows in the walls. Ranked dungeons are a real mass grave. Not a single seeker has ever returned alive after meeting the boss. Judging by the data from previous years, the chances of their victory are 0. Here Shizuke tells everyone that they are going back to the camp, and that they will return here as soon as they gather more people. Takayama says he didn't expect anything else. One in armor says they should give the guy time to rest. He asks Shu he will help them after all. Shu says that of course, if so, then he wanted to offer something. But suddenly a voice asks them if they are already leaving. Everyone looks towards the door in horror. Smoke is coming from the doors. People are panicking and asking if the voice came from the boss's room. They can't understand how this is possible. Shizuka abruptly gives everyone the command to get ready for battle. Everyone is scared at first, but they follow her order, preparing their weapons and shields. Shu does not understand why the monster speaks in the language of people, and not in any language, but in Japanese. Even Lion is standing ready with his sword next to him. Shizuka comes to the door and asks who he is. In response, he asks her what she thinks, and if she is a seeker, then let her come in and check for herself. Shu doesn't understand what's going on. Is the boss provoking them? He can't use the score on an opponent he doesn't see. Shizuka tells the boss to forgive her, but she has no desire to enter yet. Shu thinks to himself that the boss can't get out of his hall on his own, so they're safe until they open those doors. Then the voice outside the door says that then he will come out by himself. Shizuka and Shu turn abruptly to the door. The doors open, a dark force flows out of her. Only darkness is visible behind the doors. The boss's legs are shown first. A monster in sandals greets them. This is an elf with dark tan skin and golden eyes. He says it's nice to meet you. Shu continuously looks at the elf. Shizuka immediately conjures his red ball and asks who he is. The elf replies that who knows. He asks them not to think that he is joking with them. He doesn't know much about himself, but one thing he knows for sure is that he exists to kill people. Suddenly, the heads of the people standing next to Shizuka evaporate, and blood is now gushing from their necks. Lion and Shu remain with pale faces and freeze in place. The bodies of people fall lifelessly. Panic and screams begin. They don't understand what just happened. Shizuka shouts to everyone to calm down and not forget about their plan. Shu still keeps looking at the blood on the floor and the severed head of their comrade. He can't believe that everything has been going so smoothly so far, and he has completely forgotten that death is a common occurrence in this place. Just like his parents. He gets the idea that the dungeons are cemeteries for people. He freezes in prostration. Suddenly, with a sound, the sword falls to the floor. Lion, trembling all over, falls down. Shu tells himself to get ready because it's not over yet. He uses his skills. Shizuka asks him what his characteristics are. In response, silence. Lion, pale in horror, continues to tell Shu to hide behind her. Shu falls to his knees. Everything is swimming in front of his eyes. Finally, the characteristic comes out. This is a dark elf of rank A. His magic is at the double level of rank A, strength is at level B, and among the skills there are a chain of spells, mute witchcraft, multiple witchcraft, and naturalness. Shu doesn't understand how to defeat this monster. He wonders, but then the dark elf intervenes and asks with a smile. Calling them pathetic people, why don't they try to defeat him? Shu sincerely does not understand how they can overcome this monster. Kamisora is shocked by the high levels he saw on the scoreboard. In a tense pose, he is still standing behind Lion, who is sitting on the floor, blocking him with her hand. Shu is confused as to how they can defeat a strong opponent, because it takes 3 seekers of the same level to kill a rank monster. Shu remembers a squad of Kiramine warriors, realizing that the only one who can compete with this elf is herself. The hero is desperate, because their chances are almost 0. Here Kamisora notices how the dark elf, impressively putting his hands on his hips, begins to create around himself a lot of magical seals of lilac color of different sizes. Shu calls out to his companions to be careful, warning them that the elf is using a spell. Everyone is standing in defensive poses. There is an explosion. Pieces of stone slabs and warriors fly in different directions. The walls of the dungeon are covered with cracks, all lying on the floor in tile mountains. Kamisora raises her head through the pane to look at the opponent. He is amazed by his speed and strength. Suddenly, a dark elf approaches him and asks how the hero realized that he started casting a spell. Because he used an invisible magic circle. The elf is enveloped in an ominous purple aura. He glances frighteningly at Shu, noticing that this kid has great eyes. For a moment, the monster's eye sparkles. Shu turns to Kiramine in fear, saying that they need to retreat, because the monster is too strong. The hero rises, resting on his knee. The others are also gradually rising, helping each other. Shizuka holds his head with one hand, trying to overcome the pain. The dark elf looks down at them, raising one hand above his head. He uses the spell seals again and says with contempt how rude they are, because they have just started. The elf pronounces the name of the spell, Stone Shield. Huge stalagmites appear in the passage from the ground, which do not leave any passage for the fighters. A guy in a red jacket with a spear tries to hit the stones that appeared in the hope of breaking through them, but the weapon only cracks, hitting a hard surface. The monster explains that they cannot break through the barrier, as they have too much difference in strength. He looks at everyone present and doubtfully says that there is still someone capable of this. 1, maybe 2 people. He, of course, means the strong girls Kiramine and Lion. Amasora remembers that Lion cannot control his power, so he decides that it immediately disappears. He turns to Kiramina, saying that they will buy them some time, tells them to destroy this rock. Shizuke looks towards the maliciously smiling elf, realizes that Shu is right, and this is the only option, but still she can't take her eyes off this monster. Here Takayama and the guy in armor cross their swords, standing up for Kiramine. They order their captain Shizuka to go, saying that they are not so easily considered one of the best seekers in the country. Kiramine, touched by their dedication, tells the guys that she leaves the monster on them. She runs towards the cluster of stones blocking the passage. The dark elf mockingly asks if they are done whispering, and is going to use the spell again. Amasora's pupil burns with a blue flame. He warns everyone that the opponent is calling a medium-level water spell, and informs them that they have 3 seconds. Everyone is trying to protect themselves by using small protective seals of different colors. The main character summons a tree shield. Powerful tree branches break out of the ground. A moment later, a thick tree trunk rises in front of them, composed of many twisting trunks. It protects everyone from a large volume of sharp water jets. The elf asks when he will stop bothering him, saying that it really pisses him off. He, stretching out his hand in the direction of Amasora, declares that he will get rid of him first. The dark elf uses a beast summoning spell, summoning carnivorous dragonflies. Piles of monsters in the form of large green dragonflies with a huge vertically opening mouth studded with sharp teeth fly out of the seal, engulfed by a whirlwind of water. They are all flying in the direction of Shu, who is standing, not knowing what to do. But here he is protected by Lion. Using the summoning of the spirit, divine enchantment, she dissects carnivorous monsters with her sparkling sword. The girl is happy that she managed to do it. Her face lights up. The dark elf says that Amasora has a good bodyguard, already irritates him. The elf continues casting another spell. Shu warns everyone again that this time it's a medium-level fire spell. A fiery vortex is formed. The monster reports that his guess was close, but he did not guess. Following the fire, the enemy releases a stream of wind, which Amasora is surprised at and tells everyone to run. Talking about another upcoming spell, the hero closes his eyes and blames himself for making a mistake, because the water shield will not be able to block such a powerful wind. Suddenly someone uses an unsurpassed armor spell. Wind currents, engulfed by fire, fly in the opposite direction, hitting the elf who used them, and leaving a bloody cut on his cheek. Takayama and his armored partner are holding a huge metal shield growing out of their hands, while in their other hands they are still holding their swords. They jokingly say, well, the youth has gone and that Shu needs to have more faith in his comrades. Unsurpassed armor is a skill that requires 2 knights to use. It strengthens the seekers' bodies and creates a shield that blocks any damage. The knights knock their wrists together in a victorious gesture. Amasora shouts out to Takayama in fright. He turns his head with a question, which he tears off his shoulders after a moment. The man in the armor turns around, not realizing what just happened. And then a through-hole forms in his chest. All the seekers are watching in absolute horror. Amasora is shaking. He does not understand why he did not feel anything in order to have time to warn, thereby saving his comrades. The dark elf proudly spreads his hands and explains that this is a technique that allows you to cast a spell prematurely, without leaving any magical trace. He asks if Shu sees his mana, and declares that he is absolutely powerless before him now. Shu stands in despair, clenching his fists. He remembers that he is the weakest seeker, a praiser. He realizes that he has always been lucky, because of what he was arrogant, and that's what it led to, the death of his comrades. His ironing is interrupted by a series of screens with a message about getting 5 experience points. Amasora wonders if someone is currently defeating monsters with the help of his video, but realizes that now is not the time. A window appears here notifying you about the level increase, and the opening of a new skill. Shu receives an alert that he has raised his level. He freezes in surprise and sees that a new skill has been opened. His eyes are burning with blue fire again. Shizuke shouts to everyone, pointing to the tunnel that the path is clear. People turn to her and head there. Shizuke confidently shouts to the others that she will detain him, so they should run as soon as possible. She uses her power and now blood is floating around her fingers in a trickle. A dark elf stands in front of her. She shouts to everyone to run forward faster and faster. The dark elf is serious. He has already said that they will not leave. He conjures a stone shield again, which simply blocks the just experienced passage to another room. Right in front of people's noses, the passage is blocked. Small stones fly from magic and dense smoke forms due to dust. People protect themselves by covering their face with their hands. The dark elf says it will be unpleasant if she makes another hole, so he decides to concentrate on her. Lion abruptly falls to his knees from horror and the realization that Kiramine and Shizuke can no longer help them. She does not understand how it happened. Her eyes are looking into the unknown. A window is open in front of Shu. He carefully looks at something and analyzes it. He calls the crying lion by name. She turns to him. Shu holds out his hand to her and tells her to get up with a smile. She turns to him and does not understand his behavior. He says he wants her to summon the divine beast. She also holds out her hand to him. They hold each other. Golden energy forms around them. She slowly gets up and looks at Shu with big eyes full of tears. She screams that it's useless because she can't control him, and if he gets out of control, then they'll all die here. Shu understands that this is true. At the current level, Lion is not able to give orders to the divine beast, however. He tells her out loud, reassuring her that everything will be fine. He asks her to trust him and pulls her hand to him. Lion continues to stare at him while the others fight to the death with the dark elf. Shizuka shouts to the rest of the guys to move to the wall. Shu shouts her name and decides that he has to help Shizuka. Unexpectedly, Lion summons a divine beast, namely the divine beast Orochi. Shu turns to her in surprise and sees a huge white snake, as if covered with gold. She stands behind Lion, who clenches her fists and shouts that she is also a seeker. Her eyes burn with gold. Tears flow. She holds out her hand and shouts to Shu that she believes in him. He also holds out his hand to her and shakes it. And then he shouts to Kuramina that they will take the dark elf on themselves, and she, in turn, let her break the wall. Shu and Lion are standing at the tail of the snake, as if in defense. The dark elf looks at the snake, shielding his eyes from the light with his palm, and without emotion expresses surprise with a short sound. Leaving, Kuramine Shizuka also turns around and stares at the huge snake. Shu asks if this is the divine beast of Orochi. Shu says, holding Lion's hand tightly, that he will take control of Orochi. He asks Lion to try not to lose concentration. She continues to look at him and says that it's good, she understood him. Shu abruptly summons his imitation skill. The new skill he received is called imitation. It allows you to temporarily copy the ability of the person on whom he used his assessment. Together they will definitely be able to control the Orochi. Their eyes are burning. They are preparing and shouting to obey their orders. The white scales of the snake begin to turn black. She succumbs to the power and leans towards them, trying to say something. But instead only hisses are heard. The huge eye of the snake looks at them, and they understand that they have succeeded. Lion can't believe it and asks Shu again. He confidently replies that this is true, and they did it. She tells Lion to give the order. She obeys and shouts to the snake Orochi to kill the dark elf. As soon as these words were uttered, the terrible and dark mouth of the snake opened and made terrible hissing sounds at the dark elf. The dark elf does not react in any way and calls stone bullets in his direction, raising his hand up, after which a spell circle is formed. But the stones did not damage the snakes in any way. Moreover, the stones did not appear. The dark elf is confused and does not understand if the snake has reflected the spell. After these words, the furious snake attacks the dark elf with its head, hitting the floor directly. But the enemy manages to jump aside. From the strong pressure and impact, the stones fly around. Shu reflects and comes to the conclusion that mana is much weaker than the divine energy of Orochi, so the dark elf certainly does not have a single chance to survive in this battle. He turns to Shizuka and shouts at them to hurry up. The dark elf tells him that he won't let him, and again conjures something, closing his palm. Here Lion gives an order to the snake Orochi not to let the dark elf use magic. Orochi immediately obeys the order and attacks the dark elf. The golden force attacks the little shield of the dark elf. He realizes that he cannot break through here. While he was fighting with Orochi, a huge wall was broken. A huge hole has formed in the middle, which leads to the exit. Shizuka shouts to Shu that they're done. The rest of the people are slowly getting out of here. Shu happily and with a big smile tells Lion to go to the exit. She with tearful but happy eyes answers him that she is coming. They pass through this tunnel, leaving the dungeon boss inside. Dust and smoke remain from their trampling and destroyed walls. The dark elf scratches his head without a drop of regret and with a sigh utters the words that they have escaped. But then some kind of attack is abruptly made that he didn't even notice. He jumps and manages to escape from the fire that comes from the snake Orochi. The dark elf stands in front of the snake and wonders what he should do with it now. The snake rises imperiously and menacingly gradually above him. Then another dark elf with red hair comes and strikes the snake with one bare hand so that it is divided into two parts. This is a girl with green eyes, dressed in black and gold armor. Blood is everywhere now. It looks like there was some kind of explosion. The new elf with green eyes says that as soon as she closed her eyes for a minute, he got involved in a battle that he almost lost. The dark elf is surprised and says with a smile that this means that Orochi is vulnerable to physical attacks. That elf shakes her head in disappointment. She calls him Da, after which the two of them return to their gate, which leads to the room. Da, in turn, calls this elf Ha. At this time, the team is diligently running away from this place. While everyone is thinking only about salvation, Shu wonders if he will come again. Shu looks at the screen of his phone. He looks at expenses and income. He was credited with 1,000,000 yen, now he has more than 1,000,000 in the balance. Initially, he was supposed to receive only 150,000 yen. But then the bid was raised to 500,000. Then it turns out that in 2 days he earned 1,000,000 yen. He looks at the numbers, looks down and wonders if this is a decent price for his work. 4 people died during the expedition to the Heavenly Fortress. 5 people are standing in front of photographs of the deceased. Someone says they couldn't pick up the bodies, so funerals with empty coffins feel very bad. Shu, Lion, Shizuke and Shogo stand in front of them. Takayama was among the dead. Shu clenches his fist and looking into the distance makes a promise to himself that he will definitely return to the Heavenly Fortress and finish off this elf with his own hands. He sits at the computer and continuously clicks on something. His video with the boss of the Heavenly Fortress gained particular popularity. The video with the dark elf spread all over the internet and quickly gained 1,000,000 views. In the Heavenly Fortress, they encountered 57 types of monsters: bats, wolves, spiders, goblins, slimes, dragons, and other monsters with frightening fangs and horns. In other words, he could have uploaded as many as 57 videos. Thanks to that elf video, he finally got monetization. He spent part of the money he earned and ordered the editing of 20 videos from professionals for 50,000 yen for each video. Thanks to this, the number of subscribers to his channel has increased dramatically. In other words, the more people kill monsters after watching his videos, the more experience he gets. While he downloads the video and sleeps peacefully, the system notifies him again and again that a continuous amount of experience points has been received. Now he is at level 77. And his mana and physical strength reserve is 860 units. Among the skills he has an assessment at level 16, inventory at level 14, observation at level 12, imitation at level 10, clairvoyance at level 8, magic eyes at level 6, research at level 4, and spirit at level 2. After reaching level 77, he began to spend several days on the next raising of his level. His assessment skill began to show much more information, and the inventory became huge, like a gym. Clairvoyance allows him to evaluate the boss even before entering the dungeon. In short, he gained a lot of useful skills. He walks through the city and finds himself at numerous large tiles. This is a dungeon of rank B, which in Shinjuku has been passed by others for a long time. Rats live on the 30th floor, wild boars live on the 60th floor, and some birds live on the 90th floor. It has 100 floors in total, but the higher you climb, the stronger the enemies become. He came here for only one reason, namely, to summon the spirit. He goes inside, sighs and says a short word, giving the order to someone to come. He stretches out his hand and calls the spirit of Xeniculus. Some dark magic accumulates in his palm. This smoke gathers into one and forms a silhouette. First a hand appears, then long ears. A certain spirit with frightening eyes appears before him. Spirit and Shu meet eyes. This spirit looks like a lemur. He smiles broadly and thanks him for his cooperation. Wushu's spirit skill allows you to summon one spirit. Xeniculus is not a divine beast, and yet he is very strong. The only problem for Shu is that this is shown by the spirit itself. He calls Shu the boss and says he looks great, as always, and then asks how much they will work today. The spirit revolves around him. Shu wearily answers him that they will work 8 hours today. The spirit hugs him sharply and says with anticipation that then with Shu 80,000 yen. Shu is not satisfied with the fact that the spirit takes mana for its work, but money. Xeniculus follows all his orders as long as he pays him. He tells the spirit that he will fight with the new mobs and let him deal with all the others. Xeniculus tells his master that only 5,000 yen per hour, and he will fight much harder. Shu cuts off and says that it is too expensive. The spirit clicks and says, well, okay. Shu is surprised that Xeniculus has just clicked his tongue. They find themselves in a dungeon where they meet crocodile monsters who have their own projectile, shields, and weapons. Xeniculus tells the master of Amasur that now he will show him how strong the spirit of Ranka is. Suddenly, dark magic breaks out and envelops everything around. Shu watches this contentedly. The spirit at a distance seems to send its forces to the crocodiles, which frighten and terrify these monsters. They don't have time to move or react in any way, as they simply die on the spot and fall on their backs one by one. They all die, leaving behind some valuable things: crystals, letters, a bag, a box, a ball, whatever. The system notifies him that 45,000 experience points have been received. Shu reflects that Xeniculus is of the same rank as that dark elf. Thanks to his channel, he will be able to earn money, become stronger, and pass dungeons. A picture pops up in his head again, where a certain woman is lying unconscious on Eves. He gets some kind of notification. He says it's Lion. She writes to him that this means that that channel really belongs to him. She admits that in truth, she watched his videos even before he became popular. It was thanks to them that she was able to overcome her first slime. She thanks him. Shu already blushes. He thinks to himself how cute she is. The spirit maliciously elbows Shu and says how he envies his master, but he advises spending money on him, not on his girlfriend. Shu tells him that she is not his girlfriend. Besides, he already spends all the money only on him. He adds that no one has pulled his tongue, but he is a hopeless businessman. The spirit understands this, and that he knows that no one pulled him by the tongue, but he is terribly weak, so he needs the strength of this spirit. The spirit screams so that he does not think that he will yield to him even a yen because of some kind of sentiment. Shu listened to him at first, and then was distracted by the phone. The spirit asks if it's really a girl again. He says that this is not so, that this is his editor. They wrote to him asking if he would like to conclude an exclusive contract. To tell the truth, he is also a seeker. In general, he offers to meet and discuss the details on the spot. He asks what he will say to that. Shu goes and stretches. He says that cleaning 60 floors makes him very tired. He had to come here for 3 days in a row. This spirit still hovers next to them. He happily says that these trips bring him so much money, and then he looks at his watch, which gives him some kind of sign, and says that the working day is already over, so he says goodbye and says that they will meet soon. Shu is surprised that this spirit has bought himself a smartwatch. The spirit evaporates with the words that he will look forward to the next call. He raises his hands and puts them on his neck, taking off the camera. He reflects that he has shot about 100 videos. After taking off the camera, he thinks that, perhaps, he will send his partner a dozen for editing. He answers that editor for an exclusive contract. He goes to the building of the Guild of Bloody Idols. Lion and Shu are sitting in front of Shizuke. Surprised, Shu asks the question, is it really her too? Shizuke replies that this is true. She wants her and Shu to join their guild. Lion is blushing and nervous. She says that she doesn't know how to control the divine beast yet, and that Shu helped her then. Then Shizuke says that this means that Shu just needs to accept the invitation. He also blushes and does not understand. Shizuke says that with his assessment skill, the guys will be able to fight at full strength. A picture pops up in his head where everyone looked at him warmly in front of the boss gate. She says that everyone hopes that Shu will join the guild. Shu is silent, his face is blushing, sweat is already flowing from him. Shizuke says that she is not in a hurry, and that he can think about the answer. She gets up from the table and says that she will wait for good news, leaving the office. She leaves Lion and Shu alone with this thought. They are silent for a while at first. Then Lion asks him what he thinks about it. She adds that this is an invitation from one of the best guilds in the whole world, because they have no reason to refuse. Shu listlessly agrees with her thought. As a result, they say goodbye, the girl leaves. Shu thinks to himself that Eva is right. Every seeker dreams of joining the Bloody Idols, but in addition to meeting with Kuramine, he decided to talk to the editor. He went into some cafe. He was wondering what kind of exclusive contract he wanted to offer him. He sits down at the table and waits for the editor. A man approaches him and asks if he is Amasora Shu and asks him to forgive him for waiting. He turns to the man and says that it is not worth apologizing, and that he himself came earlier than the appointed time. A respectable man approaches him and says that it's nice to meet him, and that his name is Sato Shinji. He thanks him for always turning to him for editing. A waitress approaches them and writes down their wishes. Sato asks her to bring coffee. Shu thinks to himself how polite he is, and that he looks about 25. He asks him if he doesn't mind if they go straight to an exclusive contract. He slowly drinks coffee, puts a cup of coffee on a plate with a sound, quietly calls him by name, and then he shouts at all the cafes that Shu is incredible. He shouts that a huge number of people view his videos every day, and that he is the most popular seeker on this site. He is amazed at the speed at which he generates decent content. At these words, he already gets up from his desk and bends over to Shu, who backs away in fright. Everyone in the cafe turns to them. Then Sato pulls away, waves his hands in panic and asks for forgiveness, saying that he was too worried. In short, Shu is terribly short of editors for videos. He has shot much more than 10 pieces today, so the best solution would be to establish his guild and assemble a team of editors. In addition, he will need a corporate lawyer who will help in the field of law. Until recently he did nothing, so he did not consider such options. Then Shu finally tells him that, in truth, he was invited to the Blood Idols. He is surprised and asks if it is true. He asks if Shu has accepted their offer. The latter replies that he has not yet accepted because he is still considering. Sato gets up from his desk again and recommends him to create his own guild, so he can unleash his potential to the maximum. There is silence. Shu does not understand what potential he is talking about. Sato says that he was once also a member of the Seekers Guild, but his class was so weak that he decided to leave. He doesn't know if it's him, but he couldn't reason sensibly even in the weakest dungeons. Often people with similar classes can't even raise the level. Here he shouts again with delight that Shu's videos help beginners with non-combat classes to level up. According to this, Shu is their hope. From such words, Shu is embarrassed, and the guy offers him. But at this moment he is interrupted by a worker, asks for forgiveness, and says that he is disturbing other visitors. Sato abruptly stands up, bows to her and asks for forgiveness. He returns to the place and continues to say that this is why he wants them to conclude an exclusive contract. He says that he has abandoned his dream, but he does not want others to suffer the same fate. He is ready to do anything to help him. Therefore, he asks him to refuse to join other guilds. Here Shu abruptly agrees and says that he will conclude an exclusive contract with him. Sato gets up from his seat again. Not believing his ears, he does not understand if he is serious, because he was invited to the Guild of Bloody Idols. Shu says that he is very glad. Sato does not understand what it was about now. Shu reflects that Kuramine and Eva have recognized him, but only as a person who is useful in the presence of seekers with combat classes. Shinji also said that his skills are useful in themselves. He gets up, shakes his hand, and tells him that he will create his own guild. Sato Shinji tells Shu that first of all, a lawyer is needed to create a guild. If he has the funds, he advises hiring another one. And he also recommends finding a specialist who is familiar with the activities of video bloggers. Everything that Sato Shinji says, Amasora Shu carefully writes down in her phone. And Sato Shinji continues to advise, assuming that they will have to contact a large company. The guy turned to an agency that is among the top 2 in Tokyo. He is standing in front of a fairly large building of a law agency. He is met by employees. One man says that he is a representative of this agency, and that his name is Kitakabe. Next to him is a girl who introduces herself as Sakura. They are both standing, holding out their business cards. He takes these business cards and thinks that, and he doesn't have his own business card, so he feels shameful. They call him to some office. They sit at a coffee table opposite each other. He told them about his channel, where he posts videos with monster ratings. Last month, advertising expenses exceeded 10 million yen, so he was offered to start his own company. Those two listen attentively and with a smile to his story. Sakura Shimizu enthusiastically draws something and writes it down on a piece of paper attached to a tablet. He also told them about his income and other things that relate to money. Kazakube then offered Amasora Shu the services of Sakura Shimizu. He points to Sakura next to him and says that she will tell you more about the conditions, and then they will be able to decide. He leaves suspiciously, patting Sakura on the shoulder and saying that he is counting on her. Sakura's gaze drops. She calls Kazukebe the manager and agrees with him, although her face looks upset and guilty. She begins to say that she is ahead of events, but asks to be allowed to bring him up to date as his personal lawyer. Kazukebe leaves. Sakura Shimizu and Shu remain in the office. After the introduction to the course, Sakura Shimizu said that that was it, and if he thought she was suitable for the role of his lawyer, then he could sign the contract she indicated. Amasora Shu thinks, in truth, he is poorly versed in the field of law, so he does not know whether he is being bred or not. But, in his opinion, Sakura listened carefully to him. And she also clearly explained all the incomprehensible moments, and then it became clear to him that he had turned to the right address. Finally, after thinking about it, he looks at the girl, calls her by name and says that he agrees to sign the contract. Sakura Shimizu, surprised by this decision, asked him if she was exactly satisfied with him. Amasora Shu bows to her and said that he was satisfied and that he was counting on her. Sakura Shimizu looks gloomy for a second, and then says with a smile that she hopes for fruitful cooperation. She said that the opening of her company involves the issue of shares. Initially, they belong to the head. In other words, all shares will be his shares. She asked him if this was the case. Amasora Shu replies that he would like to give part of the shares to the person who is editing his video. After all, it was his idea to start a company. Sakura Shimizu hesitantly said that he could not give them 5. Then she changes her mind and says that he could not transfer 30% of his shares. Amasora Shu asked if it was really necessary. Sakura Shimizu says that if he gives them 30%, nothing bad will happen. Amasora Shu briefly replies that everything is clear. Late in the evening, at the same law agency, Kazukebe asks Sakura how everything went. She says that he is poorly versed in the field of law, and is too honest a person. Having introduced him to the right people, they will be able to buy out half of the shares of his company. The manager already claps and says it's great. He smiles and rejoices that everything is going smoothly as they planned. He gets up from his seat, then puts his hand on the girl's shoulder and says that so far she has only been getting in his way. But if she copes with this case, then he will forgive all her past mistakes. From such words, Sakura Shimizu starts to get nervous. She turns pale, trembles, sweat flows from her face. Before answering him, she greedily gulps air and says that everything will be like this. She barely leaves his office, goes to the women's bathroom, closes herself in a booth and thinks hard about what to do. She has always done nothing but listen to the orders of her superiors, but so far she has not signed even one successful contract. If she fails now, she will definitely be fired. She sits there thinking, hugging herself on her knees with her hands. After a while, she comes out of the booth. He looks at himself in the mirror. She's tired and scared. She points her finger at the mirror and tells herself that, well, her face is scary. Her name Sakura Shimizu was given by her mother because she wanted her smile to be like a flower. It's a very good name. She was always proud of it. Meanwhile, Kazukebe is on the phone. They tell him there that there have been more and more seekers in Japan lately. but they still haven't been able to make any deals with the major Japanese guilds. The girl on the other side of the phone says that their plan is to establish many guilds and become a driving force in the seeker market. She ends the conversation with a request not to let her down. Kazukabe tells her not to worry, and that today they were approached by a very ambitious guy who wants to start his own guild. And he added with an evil smile that he would make him his puppet by all means. The next day, Amasora begins not to understand. He asks if they really want him to sell 30% of the remaining shares, but then he won't have half. Sakura Shimizu says that it is better to divide management responsibilities among several people, and that she can introduce him to a person with experience in the field of management. Here Amasora cuts off and says that, perhaps, he will refuse. Sakura Shimizu, without showing that she is nervous and worried, bows her head. But then Amasora puts a cup of coffee on a plate and says she wants to give this 30% to her. Here Sakura Shimizu is surprised and hesitantly asks if she really is, but they are practically strangers. Amasora smiles and says that he used to trust his intuition. Sakura Shimizu continues to look at him with surprised eyes. She sees how he can't sort out the papers and doesn't understand anything. He is Amasora, a seeker with a special appraisal skill, but right now he wants to start his own company in order to become another victim of deception. Sakura Shimizu closes herself in the toilet stall again and thinks that Amasora is definitely not at home. Giving 30% of the shares to a stranger is just madness. It would be safest to keep all the rights to the company to himself, and why does he trust the person he just met so much? She is very nervous, drops of sweat are flowing from her face. She understands that he has only to sign, and the contract is concluded. She and his editor have 60% of the shares. In other words, if they unite, they will be able to run the company. She comes out of the stall, washes her face. She decides that now she has to set the nets for Sato Shinji. She looks at herself in the mirror with bitterness and pity. Unexpectedly for Amasora, he meets Sato Shinji in front of the building. He asks him what he is doing here. He replies that Sakura Shimizu told him that he needed to put his signature on the contract. Here Amasora wonders if he gave Sato Shinji's contact details. They enter, the manager greets them with a smile, apologizes for the expectations, and asks them to enter the room. Sakura Shimizu is standing behind him. They all sit down on the sofa. Amasora did not even think that Kitake would come to them too. They immediately offer them to go directly to the contract. He puts sheets of paper on the table and says that after signing, he will become the head of his own company. The manager reaches out to Sakura and says that from today Sakura Shimizu will be his corporate lawyer. Then he directly asks Sakura where the contract is. Here she replies that she refuses to compose it. Everyone freezes in shock. The manager looks at her angrily and can't believe his ears. Sakura Shimizu apologizes to the manager. She takes something out of her bag and puts it on the table. It's a letter of resignation. Here the manager boils up and abruptly gets up from his seat, shouting what she is doing at all. Sakura Shimizu immediately bows to Amasora and asks for his forgiveness. She admits that she has been deceiving him all this time, and that the manager ordered her to take control of his company so that later. Then Amasora tells her that he has already figured it out himself. Sakura Shimizu raises her head and looks at him in disbelief. He says that his assessment skill allows you to know the value of things. At the 10th level he has evolved, and now he can determine people's worldview. In other words, now he is able to find out if a person has ulterior motives. Those who want to harm him are surrounded by a dark aura, while honest people are surrounded by a light one. He says that from the first meeting he knew that Kitake was a terrible person, so his aura could not be darker, while Sakura's aura was pure and light. Therefore, he realized that the manager was up to something wrong, and therefore decided to entrust Sakura. Then the manager gets even angrier and sends them all. He points his finger at Sakura and shouts, even if she knows how many times he turned a blind eye to her mistakes. If she wants to quit her job, then he will make her pay for all the damage caused. Here Amasora intervenes and says that he will pay for her. There is silence immediately. The manager does not understand him. Amasora says that now Sakura Shimizu is his corporate lawyer. You can consider it a prepayment for services. He values reliable people very much. It will be even better for him to work with a person who is not in the company. Here she apologizes to him and says that she cannot be his lawyer. Amasora didn't expect such a turn and asks why she can't. Sakura Shimizu also does not understand him and says that she tried to deceive him on the orders of the manager. Amasora asks in response that she didn't do it. Sato Shinji smiles and says that this is their Shu, and that he refused the invitation of the Bloody Idols because he believed in his dream. Here Shu, in short, asks Sakura if she would like to become his corporate lawyer, and holds out his hand to her. Sakura's lips are trembling. She says with tears in her eyes and a wide smile that she agrees, shaking his hand. Here the manager is still screaming. He asks the girl viciously if she has forgotten who he is. Let her have no doubt, he will make sure that no office will look at her anymore. Sakura Shimizu takes out of his pocket and puts a record where the manager said that today they were approached by a very ambitious guy who wants to establish his guild, and that he would make him his puppet. The manager freezes in shock. The recording is still going on. It says about the request not to worry, because the rest of the guilds are also. Sakura Shimizu says, holding out her dictaphone to him, that he tried to harm clients, guided by personal motives. So this is the most serious crime. She said that in addition, using his official position, he invited her to the hotel several times. And this is also a crime. She asks him if he has anything to object to. The manager suddenly turns pale and loses his balance. Amasora Shu tells him that in this case he is forced to say goodbye to him and closes the door while the manager falls to his knees in shock. The three of them are walking down the street. Sato Shinji notes that it's not every day you face a similar situation. Amasora Shu says that starting your own guild is not like crossing a river. Then Sakura Shimizu abruptly calls Shu by name, which frightens him and immediately reacts. She enthusiastically says that as a thank you and apology, she will give her best to help him. She is sure that his guild will definitely succeed. Her eyes are already burning. The guys are standing awkwardly on the sidelines. Amasora Shu thinks that her energy is pouring over the edge. She says that the first thing to do is to rent an office for the guild. She will make a selection of the best, but for now she suggests choosing a name. At this time, Amasora Shu is shocked. Sato Shinji says that the choice of the name should be approached wisely. Sakura Shimizu says that, in her opinion, it is necessary to make a list of all suitable options. Here Amasora Shu raises his hand, awkwardly asks for forgiveness and does not know how to tell them. But he has already come up with a name. Those two are terribly interested and ask what the name is. There is a metal plaque with large letters on the wall of the building. Amasora Shu's eyes sparkle as he looks at the sign of his guild. His face is filled with admiration. The hero is immeasurably glad that he founded his own guild. He doesn't take his eyes off the sign. Here, opening the glass door, Sato Shinji comes out of the building. Calling Amasora Shu the director, he asks if his friend is staring at the nameplate again. Amasora was caught off guard, awkwardly hesitating, replies that he is just very happy. Amasora Shu explains that they rented one floor in a high-rise and adapted it for the guild office, and so far their staff has only 5 editors, but they are actively searching for seekers. Amasora Shu continues to talk about how Sato Shinji became the head of the editing team, while Sakura Shimizu took over all the paperwork. And Shu himself, being the head of the guild, records new videos with the passage of dungeons. The hero goes to the next dungeon and, stopping at the entrance, calls Xeniculus. His avid companion appears from a small purple magic vortex. The spirit loudly greets his master, clasping his hands together and with a wide smile on his furry face. Xeniculus wriggles maliciously in the air, twisting his tail into a heart, asks Shu how long they will work today, offers 10 hours. And then 20. Amasora, on the other hand, reminds the spirit that he said that he has an enhanced form, and asks how much Xeniculus needs to be paid to accept it. Xeniculus, against the background of falling gold coins, takes a sitting pose in the air, folding his legs into a frog pose, reports that if at full strength, then 1,000,000 yen. Amasora Shu is shocked. He pulls himself together, because to defeat the dark elf, he needs to use everything he can. Amasora realizes that she will not be able to defeat him if she does not fight at full strength. Amasora Shu agrees to such conditions and, confidently clenching his fist, tells Xeniculus that he will pay him 1,000,000, and asks him to show what he is capable of. The spirit is shocked and asks the owner if he is serious. Amasora Shu is not embarrassed, informs him that lately he has had extra money, so everything is fine. Amasora Shu says that, besides, he has already said that he trusts Xeniculus. There is an atmosphere of peace around them. The spirit did not expect this. Xeniculus' eyes sparkle for a moment, and in a serious voice he tells the owner that this is the first time he has met a man like him. And then, abruptly, he hits Amasora on the shoulder and remembers that everyone else was whining that it was expensive. Xeniculus says that he is still very glad that Amasora Shu trusts him. The spirit takes an open pose with his arms and legs apart and declares that now he will show Amasora Shu the true strength of the spirit of rank A, and says that the owner will not regret it later. Air whirlwinds fly around the spirit. Amasora covers her face with her hand, and when she opens her eyes, she sees a new form of Xeniculus, a human form. Gray hair up to the same pointed ears, black fingernails, a black suit, a grayish shirt and a frill. There are still fangs on his face, the same gold earrings on his ears. Amasora Shu opens her eyes and mouth in shock, does not understand who else is this. Pink peonies are flying around Xeniculus. He points to his face in a proud gesture and asks the gentleman if he is surprised. Amasora notices that his manner of speech has also changed. The gentleman asks who he is now, if he is a vampire. The spirit tells that once upon a time God cursed him, turning him into an ugly animal, and he is actually not a vampire, but an angel. The spirit corrects himself, believing that he is now a fallen angel. Huge wings with black feathers are spreading behind his back. The spirit puts them together, shining with joy and pride. Amasora reluctantly says to himself that he is cool. Xeniculus sharply brings his sparkling face closer to Shu, asks the gentleman what is wrong. why he turned pale all over. Amasora Shu yells that he is too close. Amasora Shu puts her hand in front of her, passes by the tragic story of Xeniculus, asking for confirmation whether the enhanced form does not end with a pretty face. The spirit says that this is natural and that is a thank you for the opportunity to take the old form. He will show Amasora Shu his true strength. He calls out loud a powerful spell. The power over darkness is the hidden power that controls the world. The power that allows you to change reality with your own hands. Dark magic thickens around the spirit, his eye burns, and he applies the skill of search, teleportation, and spatial blade in an instant. He disappears. Only black feathers fly in his place. Amasora does not understand what happened. Calls Xeniculus, shouting that he should not leave him alone. Then the scoreboard about the level increase appears. Amasora looks at them, lifting her head up. He remembers that he has already 85th level, and now he has raised 3 levels at once. Xeniculus reappears next to his master, announcing his return. With a joyful smile, he informs Amasora that he has destroyed all the monsters, starting from this and ending with the 5th floor. Every single one. Amasora Shu stands with her arms hanging down in surprise. He doubtfully asks the spirit how he did it. Xeniculus explains that the search allows him to detect all monsters, the teleport helps him move, and the spatial blade deals damage. The spirit remembers that there were other seekers in this dungeon, but assures that he did not touch any of them. Amasora's face takes on a complicated appearance. He explains to Xeniculus that it is against the rules to kill monsters that other seekers have fought. Amasora Shu says that in addition, this way he will not be able to collect loot from killed monsters and shoot videos that bring him money. Xeniculus' face is filled with horror. He awkwardly lowers his head. Amasora faded away from this, not expecting such a reaction. Again notices that even his character has changed. The gentleman tells the spirit to just be more attentive next time, noticing that he was very cool. Xeniculus' face immediately lights up with a smile and joy for praise. He knows for sure Xeniculus is a strong ally. Xeniculus joyfully holds his hands on the shoulders of the owner and asks him what they will do. Amasora Shu adds to himself that he is also accommodating. Evil Lion loudly resents why Amasora Shu didn't tell her that he founded the guild. Amasora did not expect such pressure. He tells her that he was going to announce it officially, but Evil Lion still indignantly explains to him that it's too late for that. Sato Shinji bursts into them in a panic in search of Director Shu. He informs him that the head of the guild Bloody Idols, Kuramine Shizuka, has come to him. A beautiful long-haired girl is dressed in an office suit with a cleavage on her shirt. She is wearing a gray vest and a black jacket with cropped sleeves. Evil Lion puffs out her cheeks resentfully. Standing next to Shu, Kuramine Shizuka approaches them, chuckling. Amasora greets her, saying that they haven't seen each other for a long time. She looks around the office and notices that he has a good guild and that everyone is giving their best to tell the world about his talent. Amasora Shu is a little embarrassed by such praise from Kuramine Shizuka herself. Evil Lion is rather surprised. Kuramine Shizuka says that most often strong seekers from large guilds start acting alone, and says that the same misfortune befell her. The girl leans a little closer to Amasora Shu and gives him an instruction. If he continues to go to his goal, then there will be much more seekers in his guild than in hers. Here she turns to Evil Lion, standing awkwardly next to her, asking if she agrees with this statement. The blonde's face softens, and she turns to the main character, who has been sitting at his desk all this time, with a request to join his guild. Her eyes sparkle with hope. She is full of confidence, reports that since then she has raised her level, and learned to control the divine beast. Amarisu looks at Kuramine Shizuka, asking if Shizuka didn't invite her to her guild. The girl straightens her hair and says that Evil Lion refused to join. Amasora Shu turns to Eva, asking if this is exactly what suits her, because she has one of the strongest combat classes. He tells her that he is sure that now she will be accepted into any guild with open arms. Eve's face darkened, remembering a picture from her past. She said that when she first summoned the divine beast, her power got out of control, and her mom got hurt. Evil Lion continues her story that mom never blamed her for this, but she no longer wants anyone to get hurt and for her powers again. And that's why she became a seeker. She remembers sitting at her laptop watching Shu's video, and says that at first she was scared, but when she came across the video, she gradually began to raise her level. Then she remembers the huge white snake, and says that during the expedition she was able to take control of the divine beast thanks to him. Her face lights up with confidence again when she declares that it's her turn to help Amasora, and then he can count on her. The guy was embarrassed after such a speech. Kuramine Shizuka bowed her head understandingly, crossing her arms around her waist. In response to the awkward silence, Eva panics a little and tries to apologize for talking. Amasora Shu remembers the huge snake and realizes that summoning the divine beast is a strong skill. He decides that he does not need to check Evil Lion with the skill. He already sees that she is a good person. The hero stretches out his hand and asks to love and favor, to which the girl reciprocates, joyfully shaking his hand. Amasora Shu concludes that there is one more person in their guild. The next day, Shu, sitting in his vast office, comes to the question whether the room is too big for him alone. Sakura Shimizu turns her head and declares that the office should correspond to the status, to which Amasora says that he runs around the dungeons, recording videos, and is almost never in the office. Sakura Shimizu suddenly remembers something, and turning to director Shu, asks him to stay in the office today. Shu, of course, asks why, to which he receives an answer that 2 candidates for joining the guild should come to them today. Amasora Shu falls into anticipation, remembering that first Eva Lion joined them, and now 2 more will come. Stars sparkle in his eyes. Sakura Shimizu informs him that she has already conducted an interview, but the final decision remains with Shu. There is a knock on the door, to which Sakura Shimizu says that it must be them. The door opens. A guy with a sword in a scabbard and a short girl with black hair gathered in 2 ponytails on her shoulders, with a magic staff in her hands, enter the office. The screen informs that the guy with the blonde hair combed to the left under the bandage is called Kiramachi Aikido. His class is a fire swordsman. And the pretty girl's name is Hamamura Yakairu, and her class is a healer. Amasora is glad to see them, but in his head he notices that they are 18 years old. The hero tells them both about a pleasant acquaintance and introduces himself as the head of the guild named Amasora. Suddenly, Aikido interrupts him with loud admiration, asking if he is the same Shu. He says that he is glad to meet and decided to join this guild because he saw his video. He praises the quality of the video, and says that Amasora Shu certainly helped him. Yakairu quietly says that it's nice to meet her, embarrassed. Also praises his video with the words that if it weren't for them, she would never have decided to become a seeker. Amasora Shu blurs with compliments, noticing that these are his fans. Sato Shinji quietly looks out from behind the door, giving Amasora Shu a smile. Amasora notices him and sees that it seems Sato Shinji is also happy about this. He is elated that they have succeeded. Amasora thanks the newly arrived guys and tells them that he is very happy that they really needed his videos. But he believes that their own efforts played the main role, and they were able to go so far and become adventurers only thanks to their own strength. Aikido and Yakairu listen to his speech with surprise. Amasora Shu awkwardly removes his hand behind his head and lowers his head in a bow, saying that he is terribly weak as a seeker, so he counts on their help. The guys are delighted and charmed. Aikido notices aloud how modest their head is and that it's so adult. He compliments Shu again, saying that he is very cool. Amasora Shu is embarrassed, and Aikido declares that their head is the best. Sakura Shimizu is watching everything that is happening and, giggling, believes that they are accepted. Suddenly Amasora realizes that if you take Eve, then there are already 3 seekers in his guild, and thinks why not try it. Amasora Shu addresses the guys, asking if they are free now. Aikido responds and notices how Amasora Shu calls immediately to the point. Amasora informs them that she wants to go to the dungeon and raise their levels. In his head, Amasora Shu thinks it's time to learn how the principle of raising the level works. Xenolicus with a huge bald head and outstretched hands asks the owner how much they will work today. Aikido raises his sword at Xeniculus with a flourish and tells him not to approach him, calling him a dirty monster. Behind them are Yakairu and Amasora Shu in complete shock. Xeniculus himself doesn't understand anything either. Here Amasora Shu intervenes and tells Aikido to wait. He says it's their friend, or rather it's his spirit. Xeniculus is holding on and trembling all over with fright. He almost has tears coming. Aikido is surprised by this information. To raise the level of these 2, he decided to take them to a dungeon in Shinjuku. Enemy dungeons are opening. Once he had such an opportunity, he decided to invite Eva Lion, so the 4 of them, consisting of Yakairu, Aikido, Eva Lion, and Amasora Shu, went there. In enhanced mode, Xeniculus is too strong and requires a lot of money, so he would like to increase the number of allies and, if possible, increase their levels. He wants to pump these 2 up a lot so that he can then clear the dungeon as a group, so he needed to check something. They come in and see several monsters in a horrible slimy form. Amasora Shu asks Aikido if he can borrow his sword. He first looks at his sword, and then holds it out, saying that he can without any problems. Amasora Shu takes this sword and defiantly cuts one of the monsters. The physical shell of the monster disappears. Amasora Shu turns to Aikido and asks if he has received experience points. He replies that he has not. Amasora Shu in her head makes the first conclusion that experience points are not awarded to the owner of the weapon if he has not defeated the monster. Here Amasora Shu slightly touches her hand with the blade of the sword, saying that they are moving on. Blood flows from his wrist. He asks Yakairu if she can cure him. She answers from surprise with hesitations that she can. Eva Lion and Aikido are watching them in a misunderstanding. Yakairu conjures healing with his weapon while being near Shu. He stands with his wounded arm outstretched. Amasora Shu sees that the wound on his arm is beginning to heal. He waves his hand and asks Yakairu if she has received experience. She replies that she has. The second conclusion is that, however, he knew for a long time that this is how it works. Healers gain experience points if the person they healed kills the monster. Amasora Shu looks at the sword and asks Aikido, because the fire charm only works for 10 seconds. He is surprised and asks how he knows this. Amasora Shu smiles, showing her teeth, raises her index finger up and says that this is the secret of the company. Then he asks him if he can use the skill on his sword. The Fire Blade is a skill that allows you to apply flames to any weapon. It increases the strength of the blows inflicted and leaves burns. Amasora Shu takes a sword wrapped in fire, sees the monsters and attacks them, brandishing the weapon and cutting them all. After he kills a couple, he asks Akito what his experience points are. Akito is surprised that he opens his mouth wide and says that he got them. The third conclusion of Amasora Shu is that the experience is shared when the seeker helps to kill a monster with a skill. Evil Lion is interested and asks Shu what he is doing there. He smiles and awkwardly replies that he just wanted to check something. He finally understood why he was getting experience for the videos he uploaded to his channel. He helped to kill monsters to one degree or another with his skills. He will use the principle of experience distribution to speed up the process of raising the level. Some time later, Akito with burning eyes says that it's all so cool. Amasora Shu asks him what exactly he is talking about. He excitedly shouts that he is talking about the level because he did nothing but got level 12. Yakiru also joins in and says that she also did nothing but treat him, but raised the 10th level. Amasora Shu tells them to relax because they helped him in battle with their skills. Akito diligently massages Shu. Evil Lion smiles awkwardly and says, addressing Shu, that they usually raise the level when they fight monsters themselves. He may have developed this worldview because he was leveling up with videos, but he wanted Akito to level up by enchanting the Xeniculus and Eve blades, and Yakiru gained experience by healing their wounds. Akito says he didn't know that raising levels could be so much fun. Yakiru agrees and says that he is right, and that at first she had a very difficult time. Amasora Shu's head goes down after a certain silence. He says that the dungeons are cemeteries for people. He says that, of course, it will be bad if they raise the level without learning anything, but a high level will help them avoid fatal wounds, so he wants to minimize any risks. Then he smiles broadly while Akito and Yakiru listen to him attentively, and adds that, after all, they are dear comrades to him. Akito and Yakiru's eyes shine with such words. They look at Shu with admiration. He gives each other 5 palms. Akito says that everything is in a bundle, and that he will give everything to the fullest in order to become useful to the guild as soon as possible. Yakiru says she will try too. They agree that their leader is the best. Evil Lion asks Shu if he is sure that they can swing so fast. He tells her that everything has been thought out, so she can not worry. It is possible that a sharp increase in the level may affect the physical health of the seekers. In his case, the stats were increasing terribly slowly, so he didn't have to worry about it. He thinks, stroking his chin, and decides that 5 levels per day will be enough. He thinks that tomorrow they will come back here to raise another 5 levels, and one day they will become the strongest group of seekers in the world. After a while, Amasora Shu comes to her home and immediately lies down on the blood with a languid sigh. A lot has changed since he started uploading videos to the internet. He reached the 100th level and founded his guild. He thinks it's good that the views on his videos are not falling. He remembers about the dungeon of the Heavenly Fortress. He thinks maybe it's time to think about a rematch with the Dark Elf from the Heavenly Fortress. Suddenly, some kind of notification comes to his phone. He wonders if someone has written to the guild's mail. Suddenly his eyes open wide. The screen says about the cup of 1,000 blades for his guild. He was sent a plan to clean up the Heavenly Fortress. He abruptly gets out of bed and does not understand what a sweep of the Heavenly Fortress is. Oranka Dungeon is a Heavenly Fortress, one of the most difficult dungeons in all of Japan. Strong monsters live there, for which they give a lot of experience. In other words, by going there, he will be able to get a huge amount of experience. In the Orank Dungeon in the Heavenly Fortress, the Seekers have already entered inside. According to the news, this operation is being carried out on the initiative of the strongest guild in Japan, the Thousand Blades Cup. Amasora Shu is sitting in front of the TV and continues to watch with great interest, waiting for something. He receives notifications again and again that 120 experience points were received. Then 140 were received, after which he raised his level. Then he got another 220 experience points, and then another 160. Since the beginning of the expedition, he has received a whole bunch of experience for monsters, videos of which he posted online. He wonders which floor they will go down to. He says that he has gained a lot of experience today. He calls up a window of characteristics. He wonders how many levels he is raising today. The window shows that already at level 112, the mana reserve is 1210, which is equal to physical strength. He has already crossed the line of 100 levels. You can say he has risen to rank A, but his characteristics still leave much to be desired. But then he notes that, nevertheless, he has more skills: assessment at level 23, inventory at level 21, observation at level 17, clairvoyance at level 15, magic eyes at level 13, research at level 11, spirit at level 9, eagle eye at level 7, magic wall at level 5, warrior spirit at level 3, and top view only at 1. He says that most of them are still aimed at support, in which case he just needs the help of other seekers. He lists in his head Akito with a fiery sword, Yakairu, and of course Evil Lion with her ability to summon a divine beast. He thinks that the key to leveling them up is clearing the dungeons. Suddenly his phone rings. He turns to him and sees that Sakura Shimizu is calling him. He picks up the phone. Sakura Shimizu immediately apologizes for bothering him on the weekend. But could he come to the guild? Amasora Shu asks if something has happened. Sakura Shimizu says that the guild from the USA wants to order an assessment from him. As a result, he comes to his guild and asks Sakura what the order is. She says that she was informed that the seekers had found an item that the evaluation sheet does not apply to, and that in case of failure they are ready to pay 500,000 yen. He is surprised and asks if he did not hear it. If such a price in case of failure, then how much will they give for success? Sakura Shimizu calls a huge sum, 100 million. Here Amasora Shu already screams, "Have they gone crazy?" and gets up from the table. Sakura Shimizu awkwardly says that she was surprised too. He asks which guild needed his services. She replies that it is Purple Mist. She says that she is one of the 5 strongest guilds in America. Amasora Shu asks how such a cool guild knows about newcomers like them. Sakura Shimizu says in surprise, if he knew how well they are known abroad. Of course, the Purple Mist is much more famous than them. Therefore, she advises him to accept offers so that more people will know about his abilities. Amasora Shu says she's right. Then he says that he agrees. He asks me to tell you that he is ready to help at any time. He really wants to raise the status of the guild, but at the same time he is interested in what kind of item they found. Sakura Shimizu turns to him again and says that he has already given them his answer, and that they replied that they were ready to come right now. Here Amasora Shu is surprised that they are ready to come right now. He asks if they are not in America. Then he remembers that Japan and the United States are connected by magic gates, which allows you to move instantly. Ordinary people hardly have enough money for such a luxury, but the 5th largest guild in America can afford it. Sakura Shimizu tells Shu that the Purple Mist representatives are already here. He awkwardly says that he is fine and is waiting for them. Sakura Shimizu asks him if he speaks English. He awkwardly scratches his head and asks if sign language is suitable. Sakura Shimizu says that she will translate for them. They are standing at the door. Sakura Shimizu first apologizes and pulls the door handle. Amasora Shu will be talking to foreigners for the first time. He is interested in what they are like. As soon as she opens the door, golden energy comes out of the room like a wave. From the brightness of Amasora, Shu covers himself with his hands with a scream. Sakura Shimizu does not see this and does not understand what is wrong with him. Amasora Shu thinks what kind of mana it is. Did they do it on purpose? He opens his eyes and wonders who its owner is. Among many people, an important man is sitting in the deepest place. He is surprised and asks if he really saw his mana. A young guy with a tattoo on his arm with golden hair is sitting on the sofa. He looks confidently at Shu. He gets up, immediately goes in their direction and asks what it means. He really is an appraiser, and he already thought that the rumors were lying. Amasora Shu backs away to the door. Then this guy puts his hand on the door, presses Amasora Shu to it and says his name is 7 Red. He smiles, calls him an appraiser and says that now they will be acquainted. Amasora Shu is still staring at him and doesn't understand what kind of characteristics he has. This is 7 Rod. He is 22 years old. He belongs to the Dragonoid class at level 125. His mana reserve is 54 experience points, and his physical strength is 81. He still has an assessment and analysis going on. He understands that he is a rank seeker, just like Kuramine Shizuka, but the amount and density of his mana is simply incredible. 7 Red pulls away from him, straightens up and stands with his hand in the pocket of his black suit. He sees this red in front of him, and behind him his golden mana is just burning with fire. He wonders what kind of monster it is. Amasora Shu freezes in place and does not understand who this monster is. A lot of information comes out in his head. He thinks that not only does he have excellent characteristics, he decides to look at his skills. He says out loud that he is a Dragonoid. Red is surprised and says that he can even say that. He snuggles up to him again and asks what else he sees. Let him take a good look at him. Amasora Shu panics, pressed against the door. He can't collect his thoughts for a long time and only says inarticulate words. Someone from the newcomers is calling 7. He scolds him and asks what he is doing. Let him not be rude to a business partner. 7 Red listens and asks for forgiveness. And then she turns around and tells this man with glasses, calling him John, that Amasora Shu is really good. John sighs languidly. Sakura Shimizu asks Shu, calling him president, if he's okay. The pale one replies that he's fine. He just feels like he's been thoroughly shaken. John apologizes terribly to Shu for this. He introduces himself. His name is John Innard, and he is now the head of the Purple Mist Guild. He points to 7 Red and says that this is a rank a seeker. Then he points to others and says that this is his lawyer and secretary, and that they are helping him. Everyone takes turns bowing as soon as they are introduced. Sakura Shimizu wanted to translate what he said to him, But then Amasora Shu holds out her hand to him, introduces herself as Amasora Shu, and says that this is his lawyer Sakura Shimizu. Amasora Shu thinks to herself, is this person not a seeker? However, most guilds have their own seekers who represent their interests. In this aspect they resemble their guild the Art of Analysis. John says that first they want to conclude a non-disclosure agreement with them and holds out a tablet with documents. Basically, the contract says not to tell anyone about the subject that he will evaluate, and not to tell anyone the information obtained during the evaluation. John says that then they would like to get straight to the point. He asks them to look at a photo of the subject and show him some paper with colorful notes through a tablet. John says that the hieroglyphs on this parchment do not belong to any language on Earth. They have a team working on the translation, but they have no results. Amasora Shu asks them where they found this item. They reply that they found this item in the Arank Ouroboros dungeon on the top floor. Amasora Shu thinks that he was brought from uncharted territory. He apologizes and says that he can only use the assessment directly on the subject itself. Here John gives an order to his subordinates to bring. They carry a suitcase to them and open it. Inside lies this manuscript, preserved in a glass case. He picks up this huge glass from objects and thinks that it is so well protected. He believes that it is really an artifact from a dungeon of Ranka here. A slap on the table is pronounced sharply. Seven gets up and asks him, leaning towards him, if he knows why he is here. He immediately answers his own question, saying that he is here to stop him if he tries to destroy him. So, he is already menacingly telling him not to plot anything strange. The frightened Amasora Shu laughs nervously and stammers that he would never. Then he gets ready and says it's time for an assessment. Suddenly his eyes open wide. He begins to say that this subject. He stops. Sakura Shimizu asks him if something is wrong. Suddenly, tears began to flow from Amasora Shu's eyes. They are dripping on this object. Seven gets up from his seat and asks what is it. Sakura Shimizu panics and asks him if he's okay. Here Amasora Shu wipes her tears, asks for forgiveness and says that nothing happened. He announces that he has finished the assessment. John is happy about it. Amasora Shu begins to say that this item is a recipe for a panacea for all diseases and injuries, that it is a recipe for an elixir. All raw materials mainly consist of blood, dark elf, giant, leviathan, moon tiger, saber sigma, zero medusa. He thinks that, apparently, to make it, it is necessary to use the blood of all these species. Except for the dark elf, he has not heard of other types of monsters. Then Seven remembers leviathan and lets out a laugh. Then one of the guests is outraged by his behavior. John interrupts and says that everything is fine, so let Seven talk. He says that they returned alive after meeting the monster on the very last floor of the Ouroboros dungeon. In other words, it was the boss. He says it was a sea serpent that deserves the name Leviathan. That's all they know from Seven's words. He also adds that he is the only one who defeated him. Seven is sitting contentedly. Amasora Shu looks at him and thinks that he is really so strong. In that case he is. Amasora Shu clenches her fist with these thoughts. John says that the recipe for such an elixir is a worthy reward for a Ranka dungeon. It would be problematic to collect the ingredients, but knowing the composition is already enough. He says, referring to Shu, that they would like to continue their cooperation with him. He waves his hand, giving an order to the other. He says that now he has to accept the promised reward. A huge suitcase filled with banknotes of money is brought to them. Here Amasora Shu says that this is not necessary. Then Sakura Shimizu is surprised that she is already screaming in bewilderment. They all froze, waiting for what he would say. Amasora Shu says he wants to borrow Seven instead. Seven starts to get angry. John gets up from his seat and asks Shu what he wants at all. Amasora Shu immediately explains that there is a dark elf in the Sky Fortress dungeon that he wants to defeat, so he will need Seven's help. He thinks in his head that Xeniculus, Evil Lion, Seven Red, Kuramine Shizuka, if they are with him, then he will be able to defeat the Dark Elf. Amasora Shu says that once they defeat the Dark Elf, he will donate his blood to their guild. If Seven agrees to cooperate, then even though it will be a joint sortie, he will be considered the first to defeat him. Sakura Shimizu continues to watch and listen to Shu in disbelief. There is silence. Seven starts laughing, then gets up, leans close to Amasora Shu and asks if he is not thinking about something amazing. He informs that he does not mind cooperating. John gets angry again and yells at him, saying that he is being selfish again. Seven raises her hands and, ignoring his words, only agrees with him. Seven tells John that Amasora Shu is a real appraiser, a rare class that cannot be replaced by anyone, so they better earn their favor. John thinks about it and wanted to say something, but then Amasora Shu says that 4 people died. Everyone turns sharply at him. Amasora Shu goes on to say that the Dark Elf nailed them like insects. Among them were those who first recognized him as a seeker. He clenches his fist and says he wants revenge. He bows and asks them to lend him their power. Seven looks away and seems to scratch his head. John sighs heavily and says that he understands him, then assures that until that day he, Seven, and Purple Mist will help them. Evil Lion runs to Amasora Shu in a pink dress and asks her to forgive her for being late. Amasora Shu says that he came early. There are still 10 minutes before the appointed time. Amasora Shu stares at Evil Lion as she adjusts her bangs. He thinks her casual clothes are so fashionable. Here Evil Lion clears her throat and asks him where they are going today. Amasora Shu apologizes to her and says he hasn't told her about it yet. He begins the story. As a result, they end up in the hospital, which surprises Evil Lion. Amasora Shu says she wants her to meet someone. Evil Lion is disappointed because she began to realize that this is not a date. She blushes, and Amasora Shu does not understand why she behaves like this. Evil Lion thinks to herself how uncomfortable she is. She asks him if this person has been admitted to this hospital. He sadly replies that it is. Continuous sounds are heard again, telling about the heartbeat. This is Yotsuba Kid, the girl who lies unconscious in this ward. Amasora Shu says that this is his girlfriend who has not woken up for 3 years. They enter the ward. He remembers the monster attack 3 years ago. Monsters broke out of the dungeon, killing many people. He was in town that day. People are running in panic wherever they look. They're all wounded and covered in blood. Monsters from different species continue to chase and kill. He remembers how he found himself in front of a huge tiger that was preparing its claws for Shu, who lies helplessly right in front of him. He pulls out his claws and points his huge paw towards Shu. He gets scared and closes his eyes. But then a girl comes under attack, with confident eyes, but full of tears. Amasora Shu screams her name in horror, Kid. He tells Evil Lion that she fell into a dream after protecting him. The rescuers arrived immediately, but it didn't help them. They barely saved her life with potions. But she's still sleeping. Evil Lion, listening to this story, covered her mouth with her palm in surprise. Amasora Shu says that's why he became a seeker to save her. Evil Lion's eyes begin to shine. Amasora Shu goes on to say that even though he said it, they both lost their parents during that breakthrough. He's doing his best to pay the hospital bills. He says he finally has a ray of hope. He smiles, remembering the subject. Evil Lion asks him why he brought her here. Amasora Shu turns to her and says that, after all, Evil Lion is his first partner, and he wanted her to know about it. Evil Lion first wanted to say something, then let go of her head. After thinking a little, she told him that she would definitely collect everything for the elixir, and that she would try her best. Let him just say so. He awkwardly scratches the back of his head and says to her and really thanks a lot. Evil Lion says with a smile that they should hurry up and help Kita open her eyes. Otherwise, the competition will not begin. Amasora Shu doesn't understand what Evil Lion is talking about. He asks what kind of competition it is and assumes that it is a competition with Kid, then asks again what kind of competition it is. Evil Lion smiles an innocent smile. Her cheeks turn red, she waits a little, answers him that it's a secret. Soon after, it was time to defeat the Dark Elf. A lot of reporters gathered at the dungeon. They announced that here she is, ready to enter the Heavenly Fortress, the head of the Guild of Bloody Idols Kuramine Shizuka. The journalist says that in the last expedition of the guild, the Bowl of 1,000 Swords could not reach the lower floors. But this time they are cooperating with a large foreign guild. He asks if they are aiming to completely clear the dungeon. Could she share her strategy or precautions? Kuramine Shizuka apologizes and says that she can't discuss anything because the leader of the expedition is on Shu, who is now pulling a camera around her neck. On the lower floors of the Heavenly Fortress, the four of them, Seven, Evil Lion, Kuramine Shizuka, and Amasora Shu discuss the further expedition. Amasora Shu says that the boss hall is more than 5 floors away, so he decides to go through the plan again. He says that first of all they recruited 100 high-ranking seekers from famous guilds. They will be support. This is in order to estimate and calculate the range of the Dark Elf, the scale of his magic, and the speed of attacks depending on his position. Seven turns to Amasora Shu as the leader and asks if it is true that the Dark Elf uses magic. Then what is the probability that he will steal their mana? If he can leave the boss's room, then won't he aim for support? Amasora Shu listens to him calmly, and then says that this is true. He moves the foot of his foot, after which some green smoke remains and says that's why he uses his Spirit Warrior skill. Several spirits surrounded Shu. This skill allows you to summon spirits who obey him. They do not have consciousness, but they can use the same skills as him and work faithfully. He tells everyone that he left one spirit outside to keep in touch. Seven is even surprised and says that this is another interesting ability. Evil Lion, covering her mouth in surprise, says that this skill is really great. Kuramine Shizuka eventually asks what exactly they need to do to defeat the Dark Elf, even though they have more combat power now. But this does not change the fact that they do not know the exact number of enemies. Amasora Shu then says he will leave them to him and summons the spirit of Xeniculus to appear in enhanced form. Xeniculus is shown to them in human form with dark wings. He bows at his feet and says that he will carry out any of his orders, calling him his master. Seven notes to himself that the spirit looks strong. Kuramine Shizuka sees that it is a rank spirit, then asks Shu what he will do with it. Amasaura Shu replies that he has two plans. The first is that Evil Lion defeats the Dark Elf with the help of the snake god Orochi. Magical attacks are disgustingly ineffective. This will annoy the opponent, who mainly uses them. However, the Dark Elf defeated him last time. He thinks it was a physical attack enhanced by magic, therefore, he snaps his fingers, after which an infinite number of spirits appear. Spirit warriors can use the same skills as him, so they can apply the copy skill to the summoner outside, so they can gather all the useful kinds of spirits. He says that Xeniculus can use teleportation, and that he will transfer the spirit to fight an elf, and then fight to protect Orochi and other spirits. He says that in the best case, this will be the end of it, but most likely they will be destroyed, in his opinion. Here he says that in this situation they will use the second plan. He assumes that most likely the Dark Elf will detect their location by mana. He adds that he has the Eagle Eye skill, which gives him excellent eyesight. He will see where he is coming from. Meanwhile, Seven and Kuramine Shizuka will ambush him on his way. They all listen to him attentively. He says that even if it does not overcome him, he will definitely receive damage. At least they will have time to call Orochi again. Here Seven says that sounds good, and that he personally wants to fight this Dark Elf. Kuramine Shizuka agrees and says that with their experience they will cope with any unforeseen situation. Then suddenly Evil Lion feels something and shouts to everyone that Orochi is defeated. Amasaura Shu immediately uses his Eagle Eye. His consciousness walks along the walls and finds a Dark Elf who is looking for them. He also sees Orochi lying in blood. He thinks he now has a good idea of his physical abilities. Amasaura Shu shouts to Kuramine Shizuka and Seven to prepare for battle. He says the Dark Elf will be here in 2.5 minutes. But then he stops talking because he sees another person, an elf with red hair, who is walking with the Dark Elf guy. Here Xeniculus shouts to his master with a worried look, quickly teleporting. Xeniculus appears right in front of Amasaura Shu and covers him with his body, which Amasaura Shu does not have time not to react to it in any way. The wall breaks. Xeniculus and Amasaura Shu in an embrace escape thanks to the fact that he covered them with his wings. Evil Lion and Kuramine Shizuka cover their faces with their hands so that the remnants and fragments do not fly into them. Seven manages to hide at the pillar. His face expresses some shock. Amasaura Shu looks out from the wings of Xeniculus and sees how an elf with red hair landed on them. She gets up. Her eyes look like a cat's. She says that here she is, and that they got caught. Da comes out after her and asks if he didn't say he had excellent guards. He calls it a survival technique for the weak. Amasaura Shu sees a huge flow of energy in them and can't believe her eyes. He looks at the elves in turn and still wonders that there are two of them. The elf girl asks her partner if these are the people he was talking about. She notices that they don't look very strong. He smiles and asks if he said they were strong. He adds that they were just lucky to escape. He assures me that this will not happen again. Here Amasaura Shu panics, because he did not plan this. He reflects that there should be only one boss in the dungeon. He sees a window of characteristics about a dark elf girl who has B rank magic and double A rank physical strength. He thinks she's as strong as the elf guy, and she specializes in physical attacks. He thinks hard about what they should do, escape through the Xeniculus teleport. Then he realizes that no, he can only move 5 floors at a time. But what can he do then to defeat the monster? He's panicking. Here the elf girl begins to act, saying that does he know that she is so taken out by people who stand in the way. So first he decides to kill him, and aims his magic directly at Shu. Amasaura Shu realizes that she is so fast, his eyes open wide. But someone calls the Earth Dragon and now Seven is standing in front of him in a different guise and reflects the blow of the Dark Elf, which she did not expect. After the blow, smoke remains. Seven, covered with stones, stands with a smile, anticipating the battle. Amasaura Shu sees his abilities again. Seven can enhance all kinds of abilities by turning into different dragons. So the Earth Dragon significantly increases attack power and defense. Amasaura Shu hurriedly gets up and begins to stammer his name. Here Seven directly asks him if they are running or fighting in the end, and then says that he hopes that he will decide quickly. Then Kuramine Shizuka comes out and says that they will all eat up on it. She adds that they trust him, Amasaura Shu. She summons her magic, blood gushes around her. Evil Lion resolutely asks what they are going to do. They are all waiting for their leader's order. He purses his lips. Xeniculus is worried, seeing how his master is panicking. But suddenly he is interrupted by Shu himself. Exhaling all the excitement, he gives everyone the order to destroy the Dark Elves. He talks out a plan that Xeniculus and Kuramine Shizuka will take care of the guy, and Seven and Evil Lion will take care of the girl. The whole team reports to him that they understood him. The elf guy tells the girl that some were not there last time, so what do they think? But the girl says frighteningly that she failed to kill him twice. She is furious, it all really pisses her off. Da puts her hand on Ha's shoulder and says that he just has good guards. so he offers her with a smile to start already. He assures me that the two of them will kill everyone. Amasarchu's eye immediately fixes everything. He shouts to Xeniculus that the elf is using a high-rank fire spell, so he orders him to teleport. Xeniculus rises above the guys, envelops them with its black and large wings. After that, they move at high speed to another area. The elf says that his abilities are still a disaster, a hindrance for them. He thinks that they are getting better. Amasarchu tells Seven to protect Evil Lion until they summon the Orochi again, and that they should try to separate them, because they can't do anything against team attacks. Seven briefly replies that he understood and begins to attack again with confidence. He hits them with his heavy fist, but the two of them manage to jump off the ground and get away from the blow. The elf asks if he really thinks he can keep him at a distance. He looks at them furiously and says that's why they hate people, because they don't understand the natural hierarchy. He uses physical strength, amplifying it with magic that the veins swell on his leg, after which he swings it and attacks Seven. He defends himself from the blow by putting his stone hands in front of him. Then Seven groans in pain and sees that his stone hand is starting to bleed. The elf asks him with a satisfied look how quickly he will break down in this case. Then suddenly a certain elixir pours on him. A whole cone with a blue potion flies to him. It was thrown to him by Shu using the portal. Thanks to the support, they have a lot of elixirs. Maybe the assessment skill is slowly increasing, but in physical rank it is at least at the level of a pro. He shouts to Seven to count on him for treatment, let him not worry, and continues to attack her. Seven clenches his fist and gives the answer that he understood everything. Seven laughs at the elf, calls her dirty and provokes her, saying let her go to him. She stands in front of him and lets out an incomprehensible laugh with the fact that she can't believe he said that. She says menacingly that he really pissed her off. At this time, Kiramine Shizuka controls the blood that swirls around her. She and Xeniculus have surrounded a dark elf who is holding on to his spells. Xeniculus is rapidly flying towards him. The elf notices him and immediately conjures the crack and destruction of the earth, over which Xeniculus has just been. He manages to fly away and realizes that the elf uses spells too quickly. It takes all his strength to teleport in time, and a strong defense, against which even Kiramine Shizuka can do nothing. At this time, Amasarchu reflects and comes to the conclusion that, to be honest, everything looks bad. First of all, the gap in strength, their attacks on them do not work, and everything only worsens. One glance is enough, they will definitely lose in the battle for endurance. He wonders if he has managed to convince them of this. Here Amasarchu shouts to Xeniculus to move everyone except him to another floor. Here Amasarchu uses her dragonoid copying skill. He takes a deep breath and lets the flame out of his mouth. The elves turn around and don't understand what kind of pressure it is. Amasarchu thinks that this is a supersonic wave of a wide range. Without a teleporter they will not evade it. Amasarchu uses the dragon's breath, the flame of which flies in huge waves towards the elves. They panic. The elf reacts and immediately sets up multiple barriers. He shouts Ha to get behind him, but then he falls silent, because he sees that this flame is capable of destroying all his barriers that he managed to conjure. The elf's eyes open wide. After this everything breaks to pieces. Pieces of stones and earth fly in different directions. After a long silence, drops can be heard falling loudly on the floor. Blood. Elf Da opens his eyes. He is unharmed and unharmed. He sees Ha standing in front of him. She is missing one arm. Her whole body is burned and covered with a black shell. The smoke and dust dissipates, blood flows from it. Elf and elf have always been together. They gave each other names, Ha and Da. It was the only thing they had, but it was enough. Blood gushes from Ha's mouth. She falls to the ground, bleeding. Da looks at her in disbelief. Amasarchu calculates in her head that there is already one. In this state they will not be able to fight, so now the course of the battle will change. Then those four of his colleagues reappear. Xeniculus excitedly shouts to his master and asks him never to act alone again, because he knows that he cannot resist his orders. He shakes Amasarchu and asks if he is hurt. Amasarchu smiles awkwardly and doesn't know what to say to him. Here Seven asks Shu, who is pushing Xeniculus, what he did. He replies that he used the skill of copying their abilities. Seven Red's most powerful attack is the dragon's breath. The distinctive feature of the attack is sound. It has such a large range that it can cover the entire floor. He had accumulated enough mana to break through the dark elves' defenses, and he didn't tell anyone about it so that the elves would think they could survive it. Amasarchu scratches the back of his head, awkwardly apologizes and says that he could not risk it, because suddenly someone would give out a plan by their behavior. Kiramine Shizuka removes her hair from her shoulders and says that she would like to pay attention to many things, but now they need to focus on the battle, because there is still one elf here. Da is sitting with her arms around Ha, who is barely breathing and can't move. He asks her why she closed it, if she remembers that he is responsible for protection. The elf girl asks him for forgiveness and barely answers with hesitations that she was going to. She assumes that she must be disgusting to him because she behaved like a human. Then Da starts to get really angry. He cuts off and says that as if they have something in common with these dirty people. He raises his head and asks them if there is no end to their stupidity. If they killed them, they would continue to enjoy their world. He states that they came to the dungeon only to kill them, and that they say it's for resources or civilization, but really only to satisfy their desires, in his opinion. Here Kuramine Shizuka's heel knocks, and she tells him to shut up. She says that the monsters that broke out of the dungeons took a lot of lives. Then she adds that he also killed 4 of her comrades, and that she is here for them. The elf gets up and says that this means that they are in the same boat, and that there is no reason to fight anymore. They kill each other because they interfere with each other. And he hate them with all their soul, but he asks to be allowed to warn them that if they kill him, then humanity will have no future. They freeze. Amasora Shu asks what kind of nonsense he is talking. The elf says he killed them for their own good. They stopped them, no matter how stupid they acted. The elf looks at the elf again and asks her if she is ready. She almost unconscious answers him that she is ready. They hold hands. Dot tells her that he loves her. Here Amasora Shu begins to feel something. He immediately shouts at the guys to attack them with all their might, because everything will be terrible if you let them do it. They all attack them at once, but then a light comes on, so bright that it blinds the eyes. Amasora Shu does not understand what this amount of mana is. The assessment did not show him where it comes from. He thinks that he should be careful. He needs to rethink everything and come up with a new plan. But then he heard the drawling voice of Xenicus, who is calling his master. He opens his eyes and sees that the silhouette of Xenilicus begins to slowly disappear. His body broke through, after which only feathers remained, calmly floating in the air. He sees a face that tells his master to run. Amasora Shu freezes in place. He is distracted from the shock by Kuramine Shizuka, who shouts at him to hurry up and use the assessment. She does not have time to say anything else. The sword falls to the floor with a sound. Eva Lion looks in horror and does not understand what it is. Seven next to her is also confused. Another dark elf with long, snow-white hair appeared in front of them. Transparent wings and several layers are visible behind it. He opens his eyes and says that one has been killed, and that they have dealt with the traitor. He turns to people with a smile and asks how those who have not even conquered the Archangel rank dungeons could think that they would be able to pass the Seraphim rank dungeon. They ask the main question, what is it? Amasora Shu analyzes his words about Seraphim and concludes that 2 dark elves have united in this. He makes an assessment. He sees that this monster is called Seraphim, who has a rank, both magic and physical strength. He just doesn't understand why. His thoughts are interrupted by Seven, who asks him what the assessment is. He hesitantly says that he does not see. Here Seraphim himself answers that it is not worth being so surprised. Whether he did not explain earlier that magic does not work on the gods, it is obvious that his abilities will not work on him, because he is a divine creature. He asks him if he understands the difference between them, if he realized how helpless and arrogant he is, and soon, Seraphim will show him the difference in their powers. He raises his hand up, on which a magic circle is outlined. He calls for divine hands. After the summoning, a sword drenched in gold appears in his hand, based on blue stones. Amasora Shu realizes that he is targeting him. He assumes that he can still use the observation skill, but he needs time to dodge. Here Seraphim attacks Shu with a sword. The blow passes right a millimeter from his face, but blood is still spilled. Seven's severed arm fell to the floor. Seven is standing in front of Amasora Shu without a hand. Seven's face is tense. He says it's a disaster because it's his strongest form, and he doesn't care about it. Seraphim tells him that this is a good reaction. However, according to him, there is no scale that could withstand his divine sword. Then he asks, suggesting to him that he can chop off his other hand as well. Here Evil Lion summons divine weapons and attacks Seraphim. Their swords collide, holding each other under pressure. Evil Lion, with tears in her eyes, says that she will protect him. Seraphim only laughs with the behavior of Evil Lion. Amasora Shu is still standing in a stupor behind. He does not understand what is happening, because he can neither evaluate him nor predict his movements. Here he is just a burden. In his opinion, he thinks that his comrades are forced to protect him again and again. He remembers Xeniculus and realizes that he died because of him. He remembers the last word, but suddenly he calls him master. Amasora Shu abruptly raises her head and shouts the name of Xeniculus. He apologizes to his master and says that he will not be able to teleport in time and he had to sacrifice his physical body. He asks him to hold out until he can be called up again. Amasora Shu smiles because she thinks they still have a chance to win. He gets up from the floor. In his opinion, as long as they have the Xeniculus teleporter, they can use that plan. Then Seven sees him get up and say that he seems to have perked up, calling him a leader. Amasora Shu, in a panic, says that they need to take care of his hand. Seven tells him not to worry about it and summons a dragon change, after which he turns into an earth dragon. Suddenly, his severed arm just grows out of his shoulder. Amasora Shu asks him if he is immortal. He tries to move his hand and says it's like regeneration in lizards, but he can't do it all the time. Therefore, now he will fight in full force. Here Seven with his claws pounces on the Seraphim and grabs his divine sword. But Seraphim swings his sword sharply, after which blood splashes again. He was shot right in the chest. He's bleeding from his mouth. Here Kuramine Shizuka connects, forming a sword from a stream of blood. But Seraphim cuts off this bloody sword, after which he drives it into her stomach. Kuromine Shizuka coughs. She does not have time to react. After being wounded, she falls to the floor, twists, grabbing her stomach with her hands. She's bleeding out. Kuromine Shizuka raises her head. Seraphim says that it must be hard to be so pitiful, so he wishes them to fall to dust and conjures his spell, causing a circle. Numerous lights rush into Kuromine Shizuka and Seven. He lets them in, they fly straight to them. Here Evil Lion intervenes and summons the divine beast, the snake god Orochi. Orochi appears and takes all the blows of the Seraphim on himself, without receiving any harm. At the same time, Evil Lion attacks him with her sword. Their swords collide again, because Seraphim manages to react, turn to face her and repel her blow. Sweat is streaming from Evil Lion's face. She is standing in front of him with great zeal. Seraphim smiles and says that it seems only she can fight now, but then adds that it won't be for long. Amasaura Shu on the sidelines reflects that this is true. If everything continues like this, then they will lose. He thinks hard that there is only one option left. In the office, they discuss Plan B. Amasaura Shu told the others that this was a plan in case his assessment didn't work. If they used it, he was sure they would beat him. Here Amasaura Shu says that then in this case they will not receive the blood of a dark elf. He remembers his girlfriend in the hospital and clenches his fist. He thinks that with Plan B they can defeat the dark elf Seraphim and everyone will stay alive. But the reason he came this far was all for Keed's sake. If he drops them and teleports with the help of Xeniculus, he can try again, because in the end he is interrupted from his thoughts by Evil Lion, who calls him by name. She shouts to him that she will try to overcome him, so let him not even dare to think about that plan. Amasaura Shu's eyes widen upon hearing these words. As a result, Evil Lion's sword flies off to the side. She herself falls back to the ground. She's trembling all over and barely crawling. Seraphim says that this is great, and that now the most helpless is left. It seems to him that he has some kind of plan. He asks him why he won't use it. Here Evil Lion shouts to Shu that it is impossible to do this, and that she can still fight. Amasaura Shu gently smiles at her, then Evil Lion realizes that everything will be exactly like this. He thanks Evil Lion, and she freezes in place. Amasaura Shu orders the spirit warriors to come to him. They all appear next to him and surround him. Seraphim asks with a smile that now, as far as he sees, they are not so strong, in his opinion. He doesn't care how many weak copies of him there are. Amasaura Shu tells him to just watch and that this is the last thing he has prepared. Amasaura Shu tells Seraphim to just watch and that this is the last thing he has prepared. There are many warrior spirits swirling around Amasaura Shu. He calls the vault and puts his hand in there. At the same time, all his other spirit counterparts also use this storage. Spirit warriors can use the same skills as him. At the moment, the volume of his storage is equivalent to an entire stadium, and therefore he placed modern weapons there. Huge tanks, fighters, and planes come out of the portals. Seraphim is surprised by modern weapons. Amasaura Shu thinks that it is usually useless in a dungeon. Magic not only surpasses it in firepower, but is also safer to use. Here Amasaura Shu shouts to the Dark Elf that he will destroy the entire dungeon. Here Seraphim is seriously worried and scared. Amasaura Shu takes Evil Lion to her, embracing her with one hand and calls Xeniculus to come. After that, he gives the order to the warrior spirits to kill the Seraphim. At the same time, several attacks sharply fly at Seraphim. He does not have time to react, only opens his eyes wide. There is a huge explosion. All the walls are shaking. The walls are cracking and crumbling in small pieces. Xeniculus turns out to be in a different place with everyone. Seven Red holds Kuromine Shizuka by the hand. Evil Lion anxiously calls Shu, who understands this behavior of hers. His expression expresses hopelessness and sadness. He privately apologizes to his childhood friend Keed and says that, apparently, she will have to wait some more. He was born in an elven village. The village is rich in greenery. Their houses are small and cozy, built on a tree. There are small bridges between each house. Elves have snow-white skin and golden hair, but he was exactly different. His skin was black, his hair was white, and it was impossible to say for sure whether he was a man or a woman. But more importantly, he had a huge mana reserve. It's about a dark elf. He was disgusting to the other elves, and when they kicked him out of the village, they called him a dark elf. He had to wander around the world alone. After all, he was used to both discrimination and travel. Only one thing bothered him. He was sitting in a tree, covered with thin material. A fire is burning in front of him. He hugs himself and says he's lonely. Then he comes up with something, raises his head and says that he just needs to stop being one. So, using the unique magic of the Dark Elves, he divided himself into two creatures, a man and a woman. They feel that everything is fine as long as they have each other. Returning again to the dungeon, it is clear that the Dark Elf is pinned down by huge walls. Explosions and destruction are still going on. He lies covered in blood. Pieces of the walls pierced his body. He is barely conscious and says that he cannot heal himself in time. He's breathing hard. He thinks out loud that he now understands about modern weapons. So this is the history of mankind. His voice says that they are such stupid creatures that they have called their own doom. He hopes that someday they will realize this and fall into despair. He looks up, barely raises his hand. The tank's weapon is shown out of the smoke and dust. He utters his last words that he is so lonely, after which he dies. The dungeon of the heavenly fortress is shaking and collapsing. The people outside, who are waiting for the team, are panicking and do not understand why everything is shaking. Is it really coming from the dungeon? Someone from the crowd pays attention to others and shouts that they are back. 4 of them are walking towards them, ahead of a sad and disappointed Shu. He tells everyone that he destroyed the Dark Elf. Kiramine, Shizuka, and 7 Red go to the tent. Amasora Shu asks the worker to cure them as soon as possible. She listens to him. A guy comes in and says it looks like the heroes are back. This is Sengyuji Tsurugi, master of the Thousand Sword Bowl Guild. Sengyuji is a master of a large guild, as well as a rank seeker. He called him because he is strong. He said he would prefer not to fight the Dark Elf directly, so Amasora Shu put him in charge of protecting the base. Amasora Shu lowers his head and says that he is not a hero, and that he only got in the way. Here Sengyuji takes him by the chin, which is very surprising. He says that if he was smart, he would behave more boldly in front of the crowd. He asks if he really wants to make the people who followed him regret this decision. The guy says he won because he was there. Amasora Shu's eyes widen at such suddenness. Sengyuji lowers Amasora Shu's face and tells him to have a good rest and leave the cleaning to him. Amasora Shu calls Sengyuji by name, who turns back to him. Amasora Shu says he will say just in case he escapes with the loot, then. He awkwardly justifies himself, says that yes he knows and asks him to trust him at least a little. Amasora Shu remains in thought. He thinks that this is true, now is not the time for sadness. There are many things that he should do and think about. Suddenly, someone with a terrible voice shouts that a message has arrived. Amasora Shu turns in shock towards this man. A man runs towards them, shouting that he has urgent news. He says that in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a huge dungeon has appeared. A certain pit appears in the middle of the ocean. The water rages and flows around this new place sideways. The waves lash, forming foam. A person shouts that a giant dungeon has appeared in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and that a huge number of monsters have escaped from there, so panic begins among people. Amasora Shu is surprised and says that this is impossible, because without warning, a breakthrough has never happened before. Sengyuji calmly asks the person to tell everything in detail. He hesitantly and with heavy breathing begins to answer that some time ago, today at 15 hours 22 minutes, a strong earthquake began. He goes on to say that after that a huge dungeon appeared, and a bunch of monsters escaped from there, among them birds, dragons, sharks. He says that all the seekers from the Asia-Pacific region have gone there, and that all the seekers ready for battle are being called upon to help in the cleanup. On TV they broadcast about this new dungeon. They show how monster sharks come out of the water. Sengyuji tells Shu that this is really crazy. He says that he mentioned that a rank seekers went there. Just think, is it really that bad? Amasora Shu thinks that even though they want to help, but now Evil Lion and the others are injured. Besides, the dungeon appeared immediately after the victory over the Dark Elf. He believes that this may be just a coincidence. He does not understand what is happening. Someone comes to them and addresses Sengyuji. This man says that they found a magical device in the boss's room, and that it looks like a transmitter. He then adds that it can translate any language. Amasora Shu's eyes widen as he remembers the Dark Elf's words that he is killing them for their own good. His hand, which holds the phone, begins to shake. He covers his mouth with horror. He hopes and thinks, just let them not say that they did everything in the wrong order. Only at the very end they had to learn the recipe for the elixir, if you think about it. That's how dungeons work. That is, the strength of monsters gradually increases to make the seekers stronger, just like in the game. He wonders if this means that someone wanted them to clear all the ranked dungeons and then defeat the Dark Elf. Then he thinks that his skill assessment has broken everything. With their current strength, they are unable to clear even a ranked dungeon. Most likely, this new dungeon will be many times more difficult than the Heavenly Fortress, in his opinion. He imagines numerous corpses and comes to the conclusion that they will not stop this breakthrough in any way. Sengyuji brings Shu to reality by asking him what is wrong. He says with a trembling voice that it's all his fault. He remembers how the elf told him that if they had killed him, their world would have continued. He begins to understand. That's what he was talking about then. Amasora Shu tells Sengyuji that someone assumed they would be able to handle this breakthrough. If someone was able to defeat the Dark Elf, then they would somehow. His speech is interrupted by Evil Lion. Agitated and out of breath, she calls his name. She screams at him that it's not his fault. Amasora Shu lowers her eyes, seeing her. She keeps telling him what's wrong with the Seekers clearing the dungeons. So what if they provoke this disaster? This picture is observed from the side of Sengyuji. Evil Lion takes Amasora Shu by the shoulders and says that it's not too late. Then 7 Red comes in and says that here he is, sad and sad again. Didn't he know that the dungeons were being cleaned in the team? Kuramine Shizuka stands next to him and says that he just feels responsible for it. She notices that this is a good leadership quality. Someone says, asking if they are all too lenient towards him. Amasora-shu looks at them in surprise, and Evil Lion with a smile. Amasora-shu pulls himself together and says that he will stop this breakthrough, so he asks them to help him with this. He asks them if they really can't understand each other, then he suggests sticking to a simple plan, after which he shouts to everyone to go ahead. At this time, a lot of warrior seekers on the ship are attacking monsters that have come out of the new dungeon. One jumps high and attacks the monster with a huge axe. The monster does not have time to do anything and is cut in half. Modern military equipment destroys birds by hitting them with rapid bullets. Amasora-shu is standing on the ship and asks if they can handle them. He adds that apparently there are no strong monsters here. Senguji says that they shoot flying monsters with 5-inch bullets from MK45, and the rank seekers take on those who are at sea or survive the shot. He says that this is a good plan of action, given the tight deadlines. Amasora-shu tells Xeniculus to move him closer to the dungeon via teleport, just to make sure. He tells the others to stay here and fight. Xeniculus comes and calls Amasora-shu a dear customer. He asks if he didn't know that he teleported him all the way here and he didn't have any mana left. Amasora-shu tells him to use the perfect form. He immediately transforms, leaving feathers around him, and thanks Amasora-shu for his cooperation. Xeniculus takes Amasora-shu and finds himself right above the dungeon. He holds him by the waist, and Amasora-shu attentively looks at what is happening. He feels a staggering amount of mana from this vortex. He doesn't understand, then why are the monsters so weak? He feels something is wrong. He penetrates even deeper with his consciousness and vision into the waters and sees the boss of this dungeon. He looks like the Lord of Waves and Water. Waves hover behind him. His ears resemble gills. He moves with the help of water. This is an old man with a beard. His face is covered with wrinkles. Amasora-shu does not understand who this is. He says that his mana reserve is equal to or even higher than that of a dark elf. And the most terrible thing that Amasora-shu realizes is that he does not see his skills. He sees that he is coming along with a huge magical tsunami. This tsunami is rapidly moving towards the ships. Then he realizes that this is a disaster. If this tsunami covers Japan, then he immediately orders Xeniculus to teleport him to a warship. They quickly appear on the ship. Amasora-shu runs to the people in a panic. Evil Lion says that this tsunami is so huge. What should they do? Amasora-shu shouts that it controls magic, and if they can apply enough force, then they will be able to neutralize it. Amasora-shu runs straight to the tip of the ship, uses her storage skill and sucks the tsunami right there. He summons the spirit warriors and gives them the order to absorb the tsunami, too. He shouts and gives the order to the others. Leon prepares, summoning modern weapons. 7 Red draws air and uses the dragon's breath. Kuramine Shizuka summons his bloody bullets. The rest of the people on the ship are surprised that they are trying to resist the tsunami. Then in that case they decide that they are using everything they have. Here Senguji regrets and says that he should not have come here. He's going to pull out the sword. He says out loud that he is a holy swordsman who will do his best. He pulls out his sword, holds it in front of him and quickly runs towards them. Amasora-shu and Evil Lion wonder if he is using divinity. At first he does not understand him, and then it comes to him that his ability is called that. He tells Shu if he knows that no matter how strong he is, it's just not possible. The tsunami still covered the ships. Amasora-shu is shaking and realizes that trouble has come. On that day, the countries on the Pacific coast suffered huge damage. The tsunami covered Japan. Houses are destroyed and flooded. Chaos reigns everywhere. The remains of some things, like shelves and cabinets, continue to float on the water. The trains derailed and also fell into disrepair. They say on TV that the east coast of Japan suffered huge damage due to the tsunami caused by the breakthrough. After the tsunami, the monsters return to the dungeon. At the moment there is no data that the monsters will return, but the country is still on alert. All this is watched by Amasora-shu with a sad expression on her face. Akito calls him the president and asks if he is watching the news about the disaster again. Yakiru approaches and says that, in her opinion, he is not responsible for this, and that he tried so hard to help the affected regions, donated money, isn't that enough? Akito, with a supportive intonation, says that there is no certainty that this happened because of the victory over the Dark Elf, and if someone tries to blame him, he will beat them. After these words, he shows his fist. Amasora-shu looks up and smiles. He thanks them. The breakthrough caused huge damage not only to Japan, but also to nearby countries. Xeniculus miraculously managed to teleport all the seekers from the ship in time, having spent all the magic on it. But the tsunami destroyed the entire coastline. They confirmed that that whirlpool was a large dungeon and gave it the name Watatsumi. In terms of complexity, it received the highest rating, E's rank. If that humanoid monster that caused the tsunami reappears, then a lot of people die. According to the experts of the dungeon of the scale of the breakthrough, another should not happen for 10 years. but they should not relax their vigilance. And so a cleanup plan was developed. It was called the Dungeon City. The most important thing when clearing a dungeon is to protect the base. The idea was to build a floating city next to the dungeon and invite guilds from all over the world there. It will not be fast. It will take 2 or 3 years to implement this plan. And before that they should become stronger, according to Shu. There are talents that only his assessment can find. He will use it to fully discover the potential of the Seekers. On the same day, a video was posted on the channel of President Amaser Shu. That is, on the channel of the Art of Analysis. The video was called The Conquest of the Dark Elf. It got more views than the rest of the videos. There were a lot of questions. Among them, is it true that Watatsumi appeared immediately after defeating the Dark Elf? Or does this mean that the breakthrough was a mistake of the head of the guild? There were other comments that the Dark Elf was reasonable. Was it impossible to agree? Someone says that the time coincides, but it is impossible to know for sure. Someone blames him and says that everyone is thinking about the affected territories, and that now is not the right time to upload a video. Someone writes that the information is important, that he heard that the head of the guild personally went to the tsunami and reduced its power. Another writes that if it was his fault, and he immediately went there, then his rating increased from 100 to 50. Someone says that there is no reason that these two events are connected. Someone does not understand, because they can't see the future. Isn't it self-evident that the Seekers are clearing the dungeons? Sekura Shimizu sees these comments and says that it seems that the number of votes for and against the president is approximately equal. He says that some Seekers support the president, but still. Sato tells her that he tried several times to dissuade him from posting this video, but he didn't listen to him and said he would post it anyway. Then he adds that after all, Amaser Shu has a lot of fans who support him. Besides, his job is to edit the video as best as possible so as not to spoil the reputation of the president. He will not allow himself to be offended. Sekura Shimizu smiles at his words. Then she remembers something and says that she almost forgot that the deadline is today. Sato doesn't understand what she's talking about. Sekura Shimizu says that recently they had a lot of people who wanted to join their guild. She adds that it would take too long to interview everyone, so they sent out applications to the recruitment department and decided that the president would evaluate them in turn. He opens his phone and is surprised because he sees 1021 unread messages. She immediately runs, shouting to the president. Amaser Shu tiredly and without strength put his head on his desk. He has circles under his eyes. Sekura Shimizu brings him a cup of coffee and tells him that he did a good job. He barely says that it was such a busy 2 days. They simplified the interview process as much as possible. He just evaluated them and checked if they passed the requirements. But there were so many people, they checked several dozen until they found their new talent. He hands the tablet to Sakura and asks her to call these people as soon as possible. She looks and asks if he really wants to hire them. He confidently answers that he wants and that they need them. He decided to hire 3, but their classes. They face 3 completely different people, 2 guys and 1 girl. Amaser Shu tells them that he is glad to see them. He asks them to introduce themselves. The guy in the raincoat and glasses says that he is Utori Hakuma and that he is an alchemist, worked in the rear in the Gildan rank. The girl with pink hair says that her name is Arakawa Mika and that she is a sculptor, was the leader of the B rank team in the A rank guild. The third, unsure of himself, a guy with hesitation says that his name is Mainjishi Guren, and that his class is a blacksmith. His cheeks turn red. He worked in the guild with rank. Hakuma and Mika are surprised and ask what he was doing there in the guild with rank. He answers awkwardly, scratching his head that he was making weapons out of stone and other materials. But he was fired almost immediately. Hakuma turns away and laughs, asking for forgiveness. Mika also laughs, asking that with stone weapons, probably only slime could be fought against. Guren clenches his teeth at this reaction. Amaser Shu notices this and intervenes. He says he wants to start by assigning features. He tells Mainjishi that he will command this group. Mainjishi freezes in shock at this news. Amaser Shu clarifies that, it turns out, he is in the position of leader. He asks him again, can't believe if he misheard. Guren hears rude words about being fired. His face is shrouded in fear and sadness. The employer apologizes and says that he knows that he was just hired recently, but such a small guild as theirs does not have the finances to carry unnecessary cargo. Guren couldn't even bring himself to ask the reason. His class is a blacksmith, as the name says. He gives the ability to make equipment, but he can only make weapons from stone, and such weapons are useless in the dungeon. He is sitting on the street and thinks that he has been fired again, so he needs to find another guild. He hopes that there will be a place where he can be hired. He comes across an ad for the Art of Analysis Guild and sees that it is recruiting new seekers. There it is written in detail about the set, schedule, and location. He thinks that maybe they will accept him. He wonders if he can pass the test, just for fun, after which he laughs nervously. And here he stands with Hakumi and Mika. The girl also can't believe it and asks again, does Amaser Shu appoint a blacksmith as the leader of the team? She is indignant and starts shouting, what does this mean? Because she just said that she was the leader in a rank guild. Why should she obey someone with such a useless class? She already comes up to Amatera's table and slaps it, showing all her anger. Guren stands awkwardly behind. Amatera's calmly replies to her that according to his assessment, this is the best choice. He says it's simple because among them, Minjishi Guren has the strongest abilities. Guren himself is shocked by such words and freezes in silence. Then Hakumi intervenes and asks if he really wants to say that he is weaker than the guy who was fired from their rank guild. The girl screams that she refuses to accept it, because before that she hadn't even heard about the blacksmith class. And didn't he say that he could only make weapons out of stone? Mika and Hakumi are waiting for Shu's answer. He says that he understands them and offers, asking how about following his instructions for 1 month. If after that they don't change their minds, then they can return to their past guilds. Then he adds that, however, he has to warn them about one thing. He gets up from his seat and says that he is an appraiser, and that nothing will deceive his eyes. Silence comes. Sakura Shimizu also does not understand him. She thinks that he was not like that before. No one contradicts him after these words. In the workshop, Guren is diligently engaged in his work, making weapons out of stones. Sparks fly in different directions from drilling. He works in special glasses. Finally, his sword is ready. He takes off his glasses and rejoices that he is ready. He says it's great. Then he gets a little sad and says that they are just stone swords after all. He thinks that Amatera's has gone so far to prepare a workshop for him, but he can only defeat the weakest monsters. He sighs and says that Amatera's said he was the strongest. He thinks it can't be true. He says he is sure that Amatera's will be disappointed when he sees that this is all he is capable of. He thinks that maybe he will be fired again. Then Amatera's suddenly enters and asks how things are going with the blacksmithing business. He gets scared and immediately comes to reality from his thoughts. Amatera's approaches, sees a lot of swords stacked in a box, and says he sees that he has made several. He fumbles awkwardly on the spot, not knowing what to say to him. Suddenly, Amatera's picks up the sword and examines it carefully. He's worried. Amatera's turns to him and says that the sword looks great, so let him continue to do the same. Guren smiles and rejoices, scratches his neck and obeys him, smiling broadly. Amatera's asks him where Utori and Irakawa are. After all, he asked them to help. He awkwardly replies that they said they were leaving. He says that they gave him their resignation letters, and that he tried to persuade them not to leave. But they did not want to listen to someone like him. He sighs heavily. Amatera's awkwardly says what an irresponsible couple they are. Then he adds that as long as he is here, everything is fine. Guren apparently did not expect such a reaction and words. Amatera's says that then he will take these swords and picks up a whole box with dozens of stone swords. Here Guren begins to ask him why he thinks so highly of him. He is an ordinary blacksmith, and he can only make useless weapons. Amatera's calls his name and says that the blacksmith is not a weak class. He smiles and says that maybe he hasn't figured it out yet, but that's what his assessment abilities show him. He turns to Guren and says that he has big plans for him. Guren's eyes widen in surprise. He remembers all the words that told him that he was fired, how he was reproached that he could only make stone swords, and that for 1,000 yen you could buy better equipment, and that these weapons would immediately break, and that they could not be used. Someone told him that this was the worst class he could get, and that he was useless in the dungeon. Tears begin to flow from Guren's eyes after all the memories and from what words Shu just said to him. Xeniculus defeats goblin monsters in the dungeon. He picks up this stone sword and addresses Shu as a dear customer, and says that he immediately broke down. Amatera's says it's great, so he asked him to make as many of these as possible. There is a huge box with these swords in front of Xeniculus. Xeniculus asks him what he's up to this time. He says that he raises the level of a new employee so that he can create the strongest weapons. Blacksmiths get the most experience among other support classes, about 20 or 30%, which is much more than his 5% per grade. Amatera's thinks he can only make weapons out of stone now, but as he levels up, he is confident that his skills will improve. If he can improve his skill, then he will be able to create the strongest equipment imaginable. At this time, in the workshop, Guren wipes the sweat from his forehead and exhales. He wonders aloud if he has done too much. Then he feels a loss of strength due to the fact that he has run out of mana. He says with a smile that he should try his best. After all, Amatera's expects a lot from him. Suddenly, the system tells him that 200 experience points were obtained. Then another 400 experience points were obtained. Then another 320 experience points. 260 experience points. He looks up in surprise and with his mouth open. He receives an alert that his level has been raised. He doesn't understand how it happened. People are discussing among themselves, isn't the latest video from the Art of Analysis strange? Comments poured in who don't understand why they need a stone sword there. Someone says that it is so poor, and that it is the very thing for the D rank. All these swords use everything from the Art of Analysis. Evil Lion kills one monster with this sword. Someone laughs to tears that it broke at the first attack. In the comments, people are indignant about what they are planning. Someone suggests that this sword may have some secret. Someone wrote in the comments that this sword is similar to the one made by the recently fired blacksmith of their guild. Subscribers are dissatisfied. They ask questions when watching a new video. Is it really today's video with these swords? Someone writes that he is embarrassed by what they are trying to do. On day 8, in the comments, people begin to notice that this sword is no longer made of stone. Someone says that it must have been made by the same blacksmith that was mentioned, but this one is already made of iron. On the 9th day, a man asks if the blacksmith was not so low in rank that he could only make swords out of stone, and now swords began to be made of steel. On the 10th day, people generally do not understand everything that is happening. Here Amasora Shu takes a video of herself and greets everyone. He is represented by Amasora Shu from the Art of Analysis. He launched a live broadcast. People start to connect quickly and write comments, surprised by the live broadcast. Someone writes that he rarely shows his face. Amasora Shu picks up a big and beautiful sword. He says that today he wants to talk about this magic stone weapon. The blacksmith they recently hired was able to make them after leveling up. Comments explode. People ask if this is really a weapon and a magic stone, and what they are made of. Is it really some kind of crystal? The other answers the first with a laugh that this is of course a magic stone. Amasora Shu says that this weapon has unique characteristics that he wants to pay special attention to. When fighting with a huge bird monster, he confidently raises his sword. People in the comments recognize the phoenix monster. The bird lets out a huge fireball from its mouth, but they do not have time to attack, as Amasora Shu simply swings the sword and pierces the monster's throat. After that, he tells them that, as they all know, there is a crystal inside each monster, which they call a magic stone. He says that this weapon absorbs the magic stone of any defeated monster. Comments are rolling in again. People can't believe if it's real. Someone writes that he has never heard of such a weapon before. A third asks how it was made. Amasora Shu replies that the sword has another special effect. It will be demonstrated by the blacksmith of his guild. A confused Gurren goes on the air, all red with excitement. Amasora Shu hands him the sword, and in the comments they recognize him and say that this is really the guy. Someone calls him pathetic and says that it is impossible that someone like him could make such a weapon. Gurren takes the sword in his hand, closes his eyes and concentrates. After that, a magic circle appears behind Gurren. Amasora Shu takes back the sword, says that this is the second effect that their blacksmith applied and immediately attacks another monster with this sword. An enraged chimpanzee is coming towards them, but Amasora Shu swings her sword vertically. It exudes a huge stream of flame that hits the monster. In the comments, people are surprised that the sword spewed flames. Someone asks if it's not a phoenix skill they just defeated. Someone still does not believe and asks what a single sword can change. The other replies to the previous one that he seems to be wrong, because all the guild members have the same thing. Amasora Shu says that this sword can use the skills of the monsters they defeated with it. On the air, they exclaim that this is impossible. Someone writes that this is amazing and does not understand how this is possible. And someone else writes that obviously this is not true. Other commentators reply to the previous one that this is a live broadcast, and that they saw it all for themselves. Someone thinks that using monster skills really sounds incredible. If it's true, then the age of magic stone weapons is approaching. And finally, a comment that touches Gurren. Someone asks if that doesn't make the blacksmith incredible. Gurren reads this comment and begins to cry that the snot is already flowing. Amasora Shu sees Gurren begin to sob and tremble. He approaches him, puts his palm on his back, and with a smile tells the audience that their guild will open sales of weapons made of magic stone, and that if they want to buy, then let them follow the link in the description. The ad says that a weapon made of a magic stone costs 20 million yen, the same as the change of skill. Here in the guild building, Gurren begins to get scared and asks if Amasora Shu is firing him. He already shakes Amasora Shu by the shoulders and hysterically asks why. Did he really spoil something? Amasora Shu tells him that he misunderstood everything. Magic stone weapons are so popular that they have been inundated with orders. And right now Gurren is the only one in the world who can create it. Gurren listens to him in fear and bewilderment. Amasora Shu just wanted to say that if he wants to leave his guild to monopolize profits, then. Gurren does not listen to him and exhales with relief, thanking God. Amasora Shu says that their goal is to make the Seekers stronger, so if they want, they can create their own website separate from the guild's website. Gurren is outraged how he can offer such a thing. He will never leave this guild. He assures that he is a blacksmith of the art of analysis. Amasora Shu asks if he's serious, and to be honest, I'm glad to hear it. Gurren begs for forgiveness and asks him to be called simply Gurren, and that there is no need to address him so respectfully. He abruptly grabs Amasora Shu's palm with both hands and says that he is the first person who accepted him and decided to train him, and that it's all thanks to him. Gurren tells him that he will do anything, just let him tell him. He is very fussy and asks if he is comfortable sitting on this chair. He wonders if he can make him a new one, of course. He will make him a much more comfortable chair. Amasora Shu watches awkwardly, remembers Xeniculus and thinks that he seems to have deja vu. Gurren is waiting for an answer from him. In any case, with his current level, he can create 30 magic swords a day. Right now he will be busy with orders for more than a week. But maybe soon he will become freer, or so he thought. Then Sato comes in and says that the bloody idols have made 100 orders. Amasora Shu is surprised and says that it will cost them 2 billion yen. Sekira Shimizu immediately comes after Sato and says that the Masters of Orthus ordered 10 weapons, and then another order for 30 swords from the Thousand Swords Bowl. And then Purple Mist ordered 200 pieces. Magic stone weapons have become more popular than he expected. This is a huge step forward for clearing dungeons. Gurren approaches Amasora Shu and says that he would like to talk to him about his skills. He listens to him. Gurren says that it seems the quality of the weapon depends on the rank of the magic stone he uses. Before that, they used stones with a rank and the weapon had 1 skill, but he decided to experiment. And it seems that when using higher ranked stones, you can increase the number of skills that will accommodate the weapon. Then he finally says that's why he wanted to ask him for a dark elf magic stone. He says that if he uses a double a rank monster stone, he will be able to increase the number of skills to 4, so he asks to be allowed to do this. He wants this weapon to belong to him. Amasora Shu listens to him attentively. Gurren says it will be the one-of-a-kind strongest weapon in the world. In the guild building, Akito looks at the sword and says what kind of swords Gurren has are amazing. This is a sword made of a magic stone and rank. Its skill cells, agility, and attack. Akito says he feels like with each use of this sword, his strength increases at an insane rate. Yakiru supports and says that the same thing about her Kakara. Now she can at least protect herself a little. She says that Gurren is really an incredible blacksmith. At the moment, dexterity is considered the most suitable skill for swords made of magic stone. This skill increases the mastery of the sword, and also simplifies the process of learning it. Amasora Shu thinks that if things continue like this, then a magic stone armor may appear next. He decides that he needs to talk about it with Gurren. While he was thinking about this, Gurren himself came up to him, sniffling, crying, and barely pronouncing, addressing Shu. He gets scared and asks what's wrong with him. Gurren says he can't believe anyone can be so grateful to him. He says it's all thanks to him, Shu. Amasora Shu gets up from his seat and asks what he's talking about, and then tells him to get ready, because he just pushed him in the right direction. He puts his hand on his shoulder and says with a smile, "Isn't it all thanks to the fact that he is still here and does not give up dreams of becoming a seeker?" Gurren starts crying even more. He says that she wants to create the strongest sword in the world for him. He wants every millimeter of it to be perfect, so it will take a long time. But when it is completed, it will undoubtedly become the strongest weapon ever recorded in history. Evil Lion comes in and apologizes for being late. Amasora Shu says that everything is in place. He starts the meeting. Amasora Shu begins to tell that the reason why he gathered them here today is because he believes that the right moment has come to tell about one fact, something that he has not told any of them. Akito asks again if it's something he didn't tell them. Evil Lion asks if even those who joined the guild from the very beginning, like her. Amasora Shu says that it is, and that only Gurren knows about it. Gurren blushes and smiles awkwardly. Amasora Shu says he just couldn't find the right moment to tell, but now the world has the right to know about it. Akito hurries and asks again what it is it really some kind of secret? Amasora Shu starts saying that this is about how level up works. He believes that in the future, people will need supporting classes like his grade or Gurren's blacksmith, so that all seekers can benefit from the grade, and also become stronger using magic stone weapons. He needs to be told about this so that the Ease-ranked dungeons are cleared and the elixir is completed for Keith's sake. Amasora Shu looks at her phone and notices something. He sees some kind of comment among the other typical ones. A subscriber asks the others if they have heard about the accident with the blacksmith, whom the guild from Osaka tried to teach. Suddenly, a person in blood is taken out of the ward in an emergency. Amasora Shu immediately uses the assessment and sees that this person from the carpenter class is at level 3. Amasora Shu walks viciously and quickly down the street with the idea that he has ruined everything. He thinks he should have seen this coming when he started uploading videos about the blacksmith. The blacksmith is still a rare class. Unlike the appraiser, there are several of them in the country. Of course, as soon as the guilds learned about the usefulness of support classes, they immediately tried to train them. Amasora Shu approaches Sato and says they will post this video later. Amasora Shu makes a video where he says that today he will tell them about the secret of raising the level that he has discovered. All the viewers are watching the video in anticipation. Amasora Shu says he wants to report this as soon as possible, as he has heard that production classes have been sent to the dungeons for training. He will say as clearly as possible, "This is a waste of time." He tells them to stop it. From what he knows, when an appraiser shares information about a monster and then the seeker kills him, then the appraiser shares experience with him. According to the same scheme, The blacksmith can level up if people use his weapons. Even a fire swordsman can gain experience like this if he gives someone a sword that his skill creates. In other words, there is no reason to send production classes to dungeons. Less than 3 minutes after the video was published, a new era began when production classes became the most popular in the world. Sakura Shimizu says that the video was instantly viral. Sato says that 500 million views are more than the video about overcoming the Dark Elf. Sakura Shimizu adds that as many as 13 million new subscribers have been added to them. Sato says that now President Amasura Shu is the largest blogger in all of Japan, and most likely, he is also the highest ranked seeker. She says that he doesn't even have any flaws, he is clean as glass, plus he is engaged in charity. Sakura Shimizu says the only problem is that their guild is too weak. They say these words together at the same time, reading each other's thoughts. Amasura Shu is surprised and asks if they really want him to hire more people. Sakura Shimizu says that their fighting class is Evil Lion, Aikido, and Yakairu, who are now playing consoles. She says that Amasura Shu and Guren are the only ones in the support and production class. She assures that the art of analysis should become a larger guild. Sato agrees and adds that they need at least 100 seekers, and if there are more, then it's even better. Amasura Shu leans back in her chair, thinks about it and says that even if they say so, they are aimed at clearing the dungeons of the Ease rank. They must be both strong and trustworthy, at least be as good as Evil Lion. Evil Lion, as soon as she hears her name, switches her attention from the game. Sato says that last time he chose only 3 support classes out of more than 1,000 people. Sakura Shimizu adds that 2 of them immediately quit. Suddenly someone shouts and asks him to let him in. They all turn around at the sound. Outside the door, someone says that if he wants to talk to the president, he must first make an appointment. The door opens abruptly. A huge muscular man with gray hair enters, whom the guards are trying to stop. He shouts that he is Matsu Ryujiro. Amasura Shu gets scared and pulls away from him. The guest shouts that he wants to become part of the art of analysis. Matsu Ryujiro shouts as he rapidly approaches Shu's table that he wants to join their guild. The guards are literally hanging on to him, trying to stop him. Hot tea is brewed. Matsu calmly drinks it. His body is covered with scars, and he himself wears a kind of robe similar to national clothes. Aikido, Yakairu, and Evil Lion are standing outside the door and watching them. Aikido says he's very suspicious. Evil Lion says he was so pushy, she thought he was trying to fight them. Yakairu adds that he doesn't seem to have washed for a week. Aikido asks if this is relevant. Amasura Shu is standing behind them and says that we still need to listen to him first. Aikido is worried, pulls out his sword and says he will guard it. They enter the office where Matsu is sitting. Amasura Shu immediately asks from the doorstep. He said he wanted to become part of their guild, but why would a 12-0 level a rank seeker want to join them? Matsu says that he is curious, and then adds that Amasura Shu is really a natural leader. He asks again if they really want to know why. He replies that everything is simple. He pulls out his sword and says he wants to fight the strongest bosses. He says that the list of guilds that are allowed to enter the Ease rank Watatsumi dungeon was compiled at the East Asian Summit, and only a few Japanese guilds are allowed to enter the city next to the dungeon. Then he points to Aikido's sword and says that they are also made of magic stone. He wants to try it out. Amasura Shu makes an assessment and sees that his intentions are neither bad nor good. He is at the level of Kiromayan and Senguji in strength. Amasura Shu stops Aikido and says it's okay. He is shocked to ask if he really intends to hire this suspicious type. Amasura Shu adds and tells the guest that he will be fired immediately if he does not follow his orders, because any unwelcome behavior is prohibited. Amasura Shu says she thinks Matsu understands what it's about. He calls him a samurai. Matsu laughs out loud and asks, meaning they want him to be completely under his control. He shouts that he liked Amasura Shu, so he loudly puts a bag with words so that Amasura Shu holds this gift. Amasura Shu has an assessment going on. He is surprised and can't believe it. Matsu says he's been losing to this for 3 years, but finally won. The bag contains a magic stone of a mega giant monster of rank A. Besides, it is one of the ingredients for the elixir. Amasura Shu is talking to 7 Red on an online connection. He says that he seems to have been joined by a rather interesting person. He asks to be allowed to fight with him on his next visit. Amasura Shu asks him if he knows he's using a sword. Would he really use a dragon form then? 7 Red asks, after all, they produce weapons from a magic stone. Now he is good with a sword. Someone is in 7 Red's office and waving his hand, giving him some kind of sign. He tells Amasura Shu to get straight to the point. Amasura Shu asks what the case is. 7 Red says they received a lot of thank you feedback after defeating the Dark Elf, so the Pentagon sent them a request. He adds that only John knows the details, but it seems that the abilities could be useful. He informs that John is now at the Japanese branch. He would like him to ask him about it. 7 Red says that this request will be quite dangerous, in his opinion. Amasura Shu leaves her office in thought. He thinks 7 Red wanted him to talk to John alone. Even 7 Red doesn't know the details. He wonders why he wants to discuss with him something that only he knows. He is driving in some kind of car and stops in front of a red light with his driver. Suddenly he starts telling him that he seems to have been busy. He asks him if he is resting enough. The driver takes off his cap and calls Amasura by name. Amasura recognizes him as her friend Takabana Senpai. He asks him if he didn't go to America. He replies that a lot of time has passed. He was surprised when he found out how famous he had become since their last meeting. Takabana Shusaku is his senpai, who taught him everything when he first became a seeker. He is a kind person, always helped him out, even though he has such a useless class. He is an excellent seeker, but Amasura does not understand how it happened that he became a taxi driver. Takabana begins to say that his wife's surgery went badly, so he had no reason to stay in America anymore. Amasura is very surprised by this news. He remembers that because of his wife's breakthrough, Takabana fell into a coma, almost like Shu. He became a seeker to pay for his wife's operation. Her case was not incurable, as with Keed, but she needed a complicated operation. For this he went to America. He says there is nothing he can do about it. The outcome of the operation was unclear. Now he no longer has any reason to engage in such a dangerous profession as a seeker. Amasura is very worried and empathizes. His face looks like he is ready to cry. Takabana tells him not to get so upset, and then adds that he hasn't changed at all. He gets out of the car. Takabana invites him to have dinner together sometime. Amasura says it sounds great. He finds himself in the Japanese branch of the Purple Mist. John comes out with a smile and tells Shu that they haven't seen each other for a long time. He's glad to see him in good health. Amasura sits down on the sofa in front of him. John apologizes for calling him here without saying anything, but he would like to ask him something. He hopes it will remain as secret as possible. Amasura agrees and asks, "So what's the matter?" John takes a serious pose and begins to say that he believes he has heard about monsters that have appeared in American cities. Amasura says he has heard because the news has even reached Japan. He asks that this is not a breakthrough. John says the Pentagon has identified the cause, and it's one seeker who pulls monsters out of dungeons. Amasura clearly did not expect to hear such a reason. He already jumps up and asks again. He says monsters can't leave the dungeon unless it's a breakthrough. John says this is true. As long as they are alive, they are returned to the dungeon, even if they are dragged out by force. Then John adds that all the monsters they found are monsters. They had been dead for several weeks, so the criminal got the nickname Necromancer. Amasura is surprised. John says that after the investigation they have guesses who they might be. He says his name is Shusaki Takabana. At this time, Takabana takes off his tie. There is a uniform and someone else's ID on the seat. He says that Amasura is the only one he regretted, and now that he has met him, he can give his all. Takabana is told that most likely his wife will never regain consciousness. On that day of the breakthrough, the house was collapsed by a monster, and his wife Remy was overwhelmed. He heard that an operation was being performed abroad that could help her, so he became a seeker to earn money to pay for an expensive operation. And yet the operation failed. Takabana is sitting next to his wife, who is unconscious in the ward. He grabs his head and hysterically calls her name over and over again, asking her to wake up. He opens his eyes and is horrified by what he sees. Ramai's body begins to slowly rise. His eyes are black. He takes her by the shoulders and shakes her, asking if she is alive. She opens her black eye. He gets scared and immediately moves away from her. She's not breathing. She doesn't even have a pulse. No doubt she's dead. He doesn't understand what's going on then. He wonders if it could be that his class is a manipulator. He can control cars, weapons, and inanimate objects as he wishes. He wonders if he could have unknowingly taken control of her body, which is in fact inanimate. He abruptly grabs his head and shouts that he really decided that his wife had come back to life. He says, could he hear her voice again? Then she tries to make a sound. She tries to say something, but only the hoarse sounds of long letters come out. He gets up and asks if she's really answering him. Then he says that, if you think about it, his abilities are an operation and manipulation, so he thinks that if he raises his manipulator class, he will be able to control life itself. He remembers his wife's happy face and thinks that maybe he can bring Ramai back. He thinks we need to level up quickly. Even if he takes Ramai's body and freezes it, it won't stay forever. But he can't take weapons to the dungeon. His abilities are not suitable for raising levels. Then he remembers Shu's words. He said there was no need to send production classes to the dungeons. It becomes clear to him. Maybe he can raise his level by using the dead then. He then began to meet with familiar seekers and kill them. He puts his hand on the corpses and gives them the order to hunt monsters for him. Thus, he received notifications again and again that a certain amount of experience points had been obtained. He speaks to himself, asks for me to just wait, and then he will save her, no matter what it will cost. Amasura returns to her room at a brisk pace. Sekura Shimizu comes out here and says they have terrible news. She starts to say that it seems monsters have started appearing in cities all over Japan. But Amasora Shu interrupts her and tells her to gather everyone immediately. At the meeting, people can't believe that his old mentor is the reason for the appearance of these monsters. Amasora Shu says that he thinks he doesn't need the monsters that appear in the city anymore. After all, the Seekers immediately killed them when they appeared in public places. He says that Takabana's goal is not these incidents, but the desire to raise the level in order to revive his wife. Akito asks him if he already knows his motive. That is, he didn't even leave any demands. Amasora Shu says he thinks so because if he were in his place, he would do the same. Akito is surprised, and Evil Lion sadly lowers her head. Amasora Shu says that he may have set his sights on the E's-ranked Watatsumi dungeon. That's where you can get the most experience. It's a matter of time before he gets into the dungeon city, which is still under construction. Evil Lion asks Shu what exactly he is going to do with Takabana. He lowers his head in thought. He recalls his words that the appraiser is not a weak class, and that the strength given to him definitely has a use. He just has to start with what he can and grow slowly. He suggested that he think about what they can do together. Amasora Shu replies that he will catch him. The assessment will be useful to him for analyzing the manipulator after he repays for what he has done. He will help him bring his wife back to life. Amasora Shu gets up from the table and says that the incidents from his actions cause a lot of problems. As soon as he enters the dungeon city, Amasora Shu is sure that all the strongest guilds will be sent a request to capture him. The Art of Analysis is primarily not a combat guild, so they will not be called. But when it happens, then a samurai comes and tells them not to worry. Amasora Shu tells him that no matter how strong he is, they don't have enough seekers capable of fighting. Here a huge number of people break into them, shouting that they want to join the Art of Analysis. The samurai says that he went to the dungeon to test the magic stone weapons, and these guys pestered him about it. He says that it seems they are all trying to get into Watatsumi. Against the background of Sakura, Shimizu and Akito are shaking with shock. Sakura Shimizu swears at the samurai, asking why break in like that again. They should have waited while they were looking for new people. The samurai says it would take a long time. At this time, Amasora Shu evaluates visitors. His assessment sees them all as neutral. He thinks they're all like Ryujiro, just as obsessed with fighting. He notes that none of them have the rank as one might expect, but their levels are still high. As a result, Amasora Shu says they are taking all of them. Sakura Shimizu calls him in bewilderment. The sight calms her down and asks her to think about how much time they saved instead of interviews. Evil Lion wants to say something to Shu. 3 days later, according to the East Asian Summit, an attacker was discovered in the dungeon city, and guilds from all over the world were asked to help in his capture. Takabana clutches a pendant with a photo of his wife Remi, closes and squeezes it, asking to wait a little longer. In the guild building, someone loudly calls the president, attracting the attention of everyone present, including Sato and Sakura, who are busy with their own affairs. With a wide smile and red cheeks, he tells the president that he has finished his special sword made of a rank AA magic stone. Amasora Shu takes this sword and evaluates it. This is an AA rank magic sword, which has air, agility, charge, and mana absorption among its skills. He examines it from all sides. Joyful Guren says that the charge skill increases his strength accordingly with how long he has been accumulating the charge. When fully charged, his strength will increase 4 times for 3 minutes. He says that mana absorption also acts like his magic eyes. This super powerful skill, in his opinion, absorbs any magic that he blocked. Then he wanted to add something else, but he only says that it is quite skillfully made, and maybe that's it. Amasora Shu still uses the grade, and then tells Guren that he is great, after which she thanks him. A samurai abruptly approaches Guren and asks, and his sword with a magic stone of a rank is not ready yet. Guren cautiously tells him that he will take care of it right now. It's just that it's a pretty rare magic stone, so he's nervous. Amasora Shu reflects. They have strengthened their strength. The first team consists of Evil Lion, Yakairu, Akito, and himself. Ryujiro and a dozen fighters who followed him will create a second team. He suggests that perhaps because of the increase in forces, they will also receive an application to capture Takabana. The entrance to Watatsumi is in the center of the whirlpool. The first thing on the agenda is the construction of an elevator leading to the dungeon, although most likely Takabana, in his opinion, has already penetrated there. On this day, a strategic meeting is held in the city under construction. Amasora Shu sees many fighters and assumes that everyone except the guild leader is still living in tents. Their meeting will definitely be held in the only completed building. Hiromine Shizuka suddenly appears and tells him that they haven't seen each other for a long time. He asks if this means that the Blood Idols have also been invited. Hiromine Shizuka replies that does he know that 7 Red and Senguji are also here. She says that there are 13 guilds gathered here. Just think, they were all gathered to capture one seeker. Amasora Shu says that's how dangerous Takabana is. She thinks he's been in the dungeon for a long time, increasing his ability to control more and more items, increasing his level. Amasora Shu thinks to herself that she is right. The more time passes, the worse. He thinks about how many he has already taken control of. At this time, Takabana is walking with people whose body is covered with a black cloak. They are carrying a coffin. They go out onto a large field. He says that it fully corresponds to his status as an E's rank dungeon. He never thought that the first floor would be so huge. However, he sees a large number of different monsters of different kinds. He says there are monsters on the first floor in rank, so they are not a problem for him. He understands that the more he overcomes, the stronger he will become. He tells all his puppets to kill all the monsters. A huge lion attacks a snake, and a troll kills other monsters with his club. He feels that his manipulation skill is already above level 30. At one level he can control 5 monsters, as well as command a squad of 150 monsters. He thinks that all the defeated monsters will join him, so this is a one-sided slaughter. He looks around and thinks that he needs to find the entrance to the next floor, because the Seekers can catch up with him at any minute. Suddenly he notices something wrong. He thinks that monsters always appear in groups in this dungeon, and he also has a strange feeling that they follow some instructions. He wonders if someone is leading them after all. Suddenly, a great magical tsunami begins. All the monsters are simply washed away by water. After the flood, only lifeless monsters remain on Earth. Takabana remained unharmed because people used barrier magic next to them. The boss of this dungeon comes up to them and says that this is revenge for his. He warns him that he won't hold back. The dungeon master approaches them and says that this is revenge for his monsters, and that he will not hold back in front of him. A human. Tsunami waves cover the entire area. Someone's severed hand, lying next to the stone, begins to twitch. Takabana thinks to himself that he understands. So this tsunami destroyed East Asia, washed away more than half of his zombies. This boss says that it seems he can control the dead. But will he be able to cope with the number of his subordinates? Takabana sighs languidly and says it doesn't look good because it will take too long. So he decides to get it over with as quickly as possible. Suddenly, these zombies next to him are dying. Blood is flowing from their necks. Takabana doesn't care if he becomes a demon lord. The blood from his zombie forms a wave and is absorbed into Takabana. Perestroika is the ability that a phrase uttered by him causes, connects him with beings subject to him. He can connect, disconnect, and transform as he pleases. Blood streams over Takabana's body. All the collected flesh forms a huge monster, headed by Takabana himself. He looks at the Overlord from above. He begins to strain from the fact that he has absorbed the flesh of all those corpses. He doubts if Takabana is really human. At this time, there is a shoe at the meeting place for the expedition participants. The expedition will be large-scale. Japan, America, Korea, India, and China will take part there. Everyone from the Asia-Pacific region participates, as well as many A-rank guilds. They have more than 10 A-rank seekers and more than 100 B and C rank. On the way, he meets a certain woman. She greets him, calling him a Japanese seeker. They shake hands. Amasora Shu says that he is glad to meet and introduces himself as a guild master. The girl says she knows he's pretty famous. He puts his hand on his shoulders and leaves, saying that she is counting on him for tomorrow. Suddenly Sengyuji comes up to him, calls her name, Soiran, and says that she is a master of a rank guild, and she fully corresponds to her title, so he better get along with her. He says that healer seekers are always appreciated. He asks him, it must be hard to be so popular, and points to another person. A blonde guy comes up to him, holds out his hand and says he's glad to meet him, and then adds that he watches all his videos. Suddenly, a crowd begins to surround them. Amasora Shu awkwardly scratches the back of her head and does not understand what is happening right now. With his other hand, he shakes the blonde man's outstretched hand. After a while, he sits on the couch tired. He thinks he's broken, so that's how fame wears him down. 7 Red comes up to him, hands him a drink and says it must be hard. Amasora Shu gets up and says that he was confused why all those people want to meet him. 7 Red asks, isn't it obvious, because after all, he will be the commander. Amasora Shu clearly did not expect this. He is scared and surprised to ask him again, drinking a drink from a can. Meanwhile, blood is being shed in the dungeon. Takabana is breathing heavily and says that he underestimated him a little, but still he is glad that he got such a valuable specimen. The boss is lying all covered in blood on the ground. Takabana gives him the order to get up. The body of this monster rises, making terrible sounds. Blood is flowing from his eyes. He gives him the command to go forward now. Amasora Shu from shock already gets up from his seat and asks 7 Red, is he really going to command? He asks why he is, because there are so many A-rank seekers here. 7 Red answers him that basically all the seekers are fighting in the front ranks. Besides, being behind them, he will be able to see not only their abilities, but also monsters. He asks, so what could be better for this than him? A meeting begins in the meeting room. Someone asks if anyone would mind if Amasora Shu from Japan leads the expedition. Everyone is silent. Amasora Shu can't believe to himself that he was really made a commander. He didn't think that Sengyuji and Kuromine would recommend him. The girl from Iran comes up to him, puts her hand on the table and asks Shu if he's nervous. She tells him that if he is not sure that he can do it, then he can refuse, because if he works half-heartedly, it could kill them. 7 Red raises his hand and starts saying that Amasora Shu was the leader of the group during the suppression of the Dark Elf. He asks if he is more than qualified, isn't that so? So Iran says that she does not doubt the assessment, but she will not trust her life to someone who just goes with the flow, and if he is not sure, then, suddenly, Amasora Shu gets up from his seat, calls Sonya by name and says that he will do it. He confidently says that as a leader, he can use the information he has just received to command on the spot. He says he's sure of it. His eyes are shining as if they are making an assessment. 7 Red starts whistling here, and Kuramine Shizuka happily lowers her head down, as if she knew that this would happen. Sonya says that it's okay then, and now she's calling them all to go where no man has ever set foot before, to the Ease rank Watatsumi dungeon. Guren and Evil Lion from Amasora Shu go to the dungeon among the rocks. Guren says they're inside a dungeon, but there's only a field here, he's never seen this before. Evil Lion says that there is such a huge space here, even though it is only the first floor. Amasora Shu looks down and makes an assessment. He realizes that the soil is wet here. He wonders if it's raining here too. He wanted to assume something else, but changes his mind, because, in his opinion, they better hurry up. According to the plan, each guild forms 10 groups, then they disperse to search, forming a fan shape. Thus, the guild masters remain in the center and can observe all forces, at the same time making a map of the area in all directions. There are many more people walking next to them. The Americans, 7 Red will replace Guildmaster John. China, Iran, Korea and India have their own rank seekers as guild masters. Japan has Evil Lion, and he himself. Guren is also with them, as he is needed for the sudden repair of weapons. Kuramine and Senguji recommended him as a commander. He assumes that, probably, it is because of his personal acquaintance with Takabana, with the best outcome. He can persuade him and peacefully resolve everything. Suddenly, Sonya calls him. He shows the tablet and says that it seems that a huge number of monster corpses have been found. Most likely the entrance to the next level is somewhere nearby. He looks at the map. 7 Red asks if they should head there. Amasora Shu says not yet, and that they will continue on their way. The Seeker of India asks, isn't this nonsense? Of course, if there are corpses here, it means that he broke through them. The Korean representative agrees and says that even if they don't move forward, they can find something if they look at the bodies. Guren argues with them and says that he is sure that the president knows what he is doing. At this time, Amasora Shu bends down and feels the ground. He tells everyone that the clue is in the soil. Evil Lion does not understand and asks him again. He replies that the further they go, the wetter the male gets. He also appreciated the drops on the plants. They are created by magic. He says that they also know a monster that could cover everything with water here, and that most likely it was the work of the same monster that caused the tsunami during the breakout. He thinks he used the same attack against the Takabana zombies. Amasora Shu turns to Sonya and asks if there are many undead among those corpses. She replies that his guess is correct. The Seeker of India says that, if you think about it, the appraiser understands so much. Against the background of Guren rejoices and says that Amasora Shu is simply amazing. Amasora Shu continues to ponder if Takabana was able to cope with that monster. Then now his strength is at least at the level of a dark elf. He tells everyone out loud that he is still sure they should go where the soil is wettest. Evil Lion tells everyone to hurry up then. They find themselves on the second floor, which is called the lava belt. Everything around is dry and lifeless. A volcano erupts in the middle. 7 Red notices and tells the others that he sees signs of a struggle. Suddenly, Amasora Shu feels something is wrong. A huge monster consisting of crystals appears among the sharp mountains. The Seeker of Korea shouts that it is a golem. The Seeker of India is surprised at what a huge monster, because they are only on the second floor. Amasora Shu evaluates and informs everyone that this is a mithril golem of rank A. He has D rank magic, and physical strength is at A rank. He offers to knock him down by applying several similar skills at the same time. This huge golem is attacking them. Amasora Shu says he has evaluated which skills will be effective against the mithril golem. He tells everyone to attack on his signal. Everyone listens to him. 7 Red addresses him as a leader and says that it is good. Amasora Shu summons Xeniculus. Xeniculus appears in his usual form. Amasora Shu orders him to distract the golem by running around. He is indignant. What a rude order he has. Suddenly, the golem attacks the spirit. He manages to react and jump aside. Amasora Shu uses telepathy. This skill allows him to communicate telepathically with everyone he touched earlier. He shook hands with everyone before the meeting. He thinks that maybe this is the best skill to control a fight. He tells everyone that fire and air will work effectively against the golem. First, the leader of each squad attacks with a weapon made of magic stone. If this does not work, then they should be ready to attack, according to his orders. After that, he tells Evil Lion that it's her turn to summon. She obeys, raises her sword and summons the divine beast, the fire god, whose name is Kazuchi. Amasora Shu tells 7 Red to follow her attack. He immediately replies that his order has been accepted. 7 Red transforms into a flaming dragon and attacks the golem with fire. Mithril has a high resistance to magic, but its melting point is not that high. If they attack it with fire magic enhanced with air magic, then they can melt it to such a state that it will no longer be a golem. Through telepathy, he tells everyone to get ready. People obey and wait for his order at a low start. As soon as Amasur-Shu's command has been given, everyone attacks the golem at once. The golem melts and just loses its shape, falling to the ground. The Korean seeker says that it's incredible. They so easily defeated a rank monster that they had never encountered before. The Indian seeker says that accurate information and orders have had a greater impact than he expected. He admires the strength of such an appraiser. After that, they easily defeated rank monsters. It had been several days since they entered Watatsumi, and finally on the 3rd day they reached the 3rd floor. Another mithril golem appears before them, which is controlled by another person. He has D rank magic, and physical strength is at A rank. Among the skills he has a mana strike and mineral absorption. As soon as Amasur-Shu sees that the golem is controlled, he informs the others that Takabana is on this floor, where they themselves are. He says that he is sure that his level has grown a lot. He informs that there is a possibility that if they let him reach the 4th floor, he will become so strong that they will not be able to stop him, so they have to stop him before that. So Iran agrees that they need to stop him as soon as possible. She asks that Amasur-Shu knows Takabana well, how exactly they met. He tells her that about a year ago, he taught him, being his senior. Evil Lion is surprised by this information. The whole crowd reacts negatively and asks, so they are friends. The Korean seeker begins to doubt whether they can continue under his command. The Indian seeker asks what he is trying to achieve by participating in this expedition. Amasur-Shu says that if they don't trust him, he will gladly relinquish command, but in return, he asks to be allowed to talk to Takabana when they find him. They ask him what he's going to tell him. He starts saying that he doesn't know about his skills yet. Here the Indian seeker takes him by the clothes and shouts at him not to play with them, because they have no proof that he will not betray them. Here the samurai intervenes and passes his sword between these two. He asks for forgiveness and says that he will not allow force to be used against his master. The seeker of India begins to get angry. 7 Red asks him if he knows how Amasur-Shu tried to stop the tsunami. Kuramine Shizuka also supports and says that if he wanted to betray humanity, he would publish all those videos to help them. Senguji says that, in his opinion, the fact that he shares information at least proves that he is serious about clearing dungeons. The Seeker of India shouts that this is the problem, that if he decided that clearing the dungeon is easier with the power of Takabana, will they take responsibility if he betrays them? 7 Red tells him to forget about who's in charge now. Isn't it great if they just watch him talk to Takabana? He won't let up and says that unlike rich countries like them, they have to protect the resources of this dungeon. 7 Red asks what he's talking about now, because they came to clean up this dungeon for the sake of humanity. Then Iran intervenes and tells them to stop right now. She turns to Amasur-Shu and says that he seems to have many allies. She says that she will watch Shu, will not take her eyes off him for a second. He asks the doubters if this is acceptable. The man says that is acceptable, but they will also be watching him. The Seeker of Korea says that then as long as the 3 of them are in the same squad, she will agree. The Seeker of India apologizes to Amasur-Shu and says that his words sounded like he suspects him of betrayal more than it really is. He assures that he will be watching them, but let him know that this is only to prove his innocence. Amasur-Shu smiles and says that he is sure that he would also suspect if he were in his place. They decide to hurry up and approach the dark entrance, where there is a step down, and then they find them. Dark magic is blowing from this entrance. With the help of his abilities, he sees Takabana and informs the others that they have found him. Amasur-Shu says that he should be on this floor not far from them. If they come a little closer, he will know that they are here, so they should be careful. The Seeker of India asks where he is now. The Seeker of Korea asks how many zombies he has. Amasur-Shu reports that humanoid monsters and zombie seekers are with him. In total, there are about 300 of them. Everyone is shocked by such a figure. Amasur-Shu confirms and says that right now they are all fighting. He tells them that they are fighting a monster that looks like a female queen of the undead. She has the shaman skill, which she uses to summon the undead, just like Takabana. Kuramine Shizuka asks if she has a stronger ability than Takabana, who answers negatively, because the shaman can also control the undead, but Takabana's ability is more perfect. If he took control of her monsters, then he would win. He tells them that the longer the fight lasts, the more corpses Takabana will get, but right now he is expending his strength in the battle with the shaman, so they need to attack as soon as possible. He gives instructions that they need 3 rank seekers to fight him. The rest will keep the zombies at a distance. But first he asks to let him talk to him. So Iran says that after all, he wanted to try to talk to him. The Seeker of India says that 3 of them will go with him. 7 Red says he will go too, and Kuramine Shizuka joins them. Amasur-Shu reflects and realizes that then it turns out that everyone goes. Samurai and Evil Lion are looking at him with great hope. He ponders and asks, what then about? At this time, Tachibana kills all the undead of his enemy. The last skeleton dies. Tachibana says it must be her last undead. He looks up and realizes that she has escaped. He says that monsters like to run away, and then asks Shu about it, who appeared in front of him with Evil Eye on. He asks him if they really came together. Shu begins to say that he was allowed to talk to him, and that the others will teleport here in 5 minutes. Tachibana says that he is naive, as always. For this reason he could not leave him alone then. Shu tells him that they don't want to fight. He asks him to surrender because he has already evaluated him, and that he will never have a skill capable of restoring the mind of the dead. He calls him by name and says sharply that he is lying. Suddenly, a dead hand comes out of the ground first, and then the whole body of that man. Shu recognizes him as the humanoid monster who created the tsunami. He stands in front of him with a sword formed from water. Evil Lion immediately summons the divine god Kazuchi and deflects the blow of this monster. Shu shouts, asks Tachibana to listen to him, that it is impossible, no matter how many levels he rises. The latter answers him that he has no choice but to believe that he is lying, because he has gone so far that there is no way back. All he can do is keep going until he finds the power he needs, just like Shu has no choice but to search for the components of the elixir for Keed. Shu shouts to him that then he will help him. He will find this power for him. He is sure. He even promises him that he will find a way while he is serving his sentence. Tachibana screams how long it will take. Does he really think that Ramai's body will last that long? Does he really think that he will really let him waste his time? Shu shouts at him, almost begging, asking him to come back with him. Then Evil Lion screams, asking him to trust him, because he just wants to help him. Tachibana says that he understands, and then asks, in that case, why not help him? Suddenly, the body of the humanoid monster explodes. All the blood covers and penetrates into the body of Evil Lion. Shu runs to her aid. Tachibana says that the curse of the dead has just entered her. He asks how long it will take, because she will not last until the arrival of his comrades, and that for sure she will die soon. Shu begins to panic. Tachibana says that there is a way to save her. He throws him a certain potion. He asks Shu to tell him. This is an elixir of Ease rank, which completely heals the body from any